Right. Adult committee members are here, and it's at 6:30. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30. I will begin, though, with the statement that I've been reading for all meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. As Dr. Daly mentioned, it's also being streamed this time, we believe, on NORCAM, and it's also being broadcast on the educational channel. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the meeting as provided for in this order. So if anybody is listening from the public and you do have questions, I will try to remember to leave it open after different topics, but please feel free to jump in if you have questions or comments. So with that done, we'll move on to the first order of business, which is public input. If there are any members of the public that want to speak about something that is not on the agenda tonight, I'll pause for 5 or 6 seconds to let you jump in. And if you're on mute, I think it's *6 to unmute. Okay, hearing none, I will move to Julia. Julia Thorstad is kind enough to join us to give us a student report. Julia, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Students have completed their first week of Phase 1 of remote learning. The week went very well, with teachers being able to set up video chats for the designated class periods and classes with all or close to all attendance, with an emphasis on no homework, assessments, or grading at this time, but rather a continuation of learning and a deeper exploration of standards. Both teachers and students think that it will run even smoother this week, as both sides are able to work out the kinks we encountered. Many teachers chose to use the allotted hour by meeting on video chat for about 10 to 15 minutes to check in with everyone, explain the assignment for that day, and then let us go to complete it for the bulk of the class and open the video chat at the end for any questions. Students understand that advanced placement classes require additional work on your own to study for the now online exams. Students are overall very happy with this setup for remote learning, especially having the structured school back in our daily routine and the face-to-face social interaction from seeing our classmates and teachers. Starting class at 10 has helped students to get close to their recommended hours of sleep as well, and a comfortable hour for lunch is always nice. Social aspects of high school life have changed, but students still manage to connect with their friends using technology. A lot of kids organize their own video chats with friends or people they have not seen in a while. My lunch table has met on video call during the break between classes to eat and talk with each other. Student Council also made a challenge using the TikTok app for who could get the most likes on a video, which was really fun and brought a lot of students back together with a laugh. My favorite student work so far was from Anatomy with Miss Jolie Bear. Before we left for school, we were on our immune system unit, so to continue with this learning, she found us a virtual immunology lab from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute that simulates an interactive lab environment and lets you click on various medical equipment and walk you through the procedures, which is very realistic and a cool way to learn from home. The lab allowed us to do the antibody testing that could be used in the near future to determine who of the population has already been exposed to COVID and can return to the public, as what we learned about the immune system is that once your body encounters a disease, it builds up antibodies that will fight the disease the second time you're exposed to it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from anybody? I'll just sort of open it up.
Can you describe the winning TikTok video?
Yeah, it was actually a student who she contacted like some of our favorite teachers, and she had them send in videos of them doing a dance. So it was like a combination of teachers and students. That was fun, and it's still up on the TikTok under NR Stuco if anybody wants to check it out.
Perfect, thank you. Now, so Julie, you graduate this year, so I guess my question would be, number one, do you know where you're going to college? And number two, well, first, why don't we start with that?
Well, I'm actually a junior, but
Oh, you're a junior.
Yeah.
Okay. So were you planning on doing, so it's junior year, I imagine this is when you're starting to look at colleges. Are you being
Right.
now, are you going to try to do things summer tours or?
Yeah, I actually am looking like to play soccer in college, so I kind of have not only like the tours but the ID clinic as well, and that's definitely been tough for a lot of the junior class because now like a lot of our college process will be in the summer unless you were ahead on it. But we're definitely using the time to like study for those standardized tests when they'll happen and do a lot of research on colleges.
Good luck for that, then.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions for Julia from anybody?
Julia, this is Dr. Daly. I promoted you to class of 2020 in our agenda here. Right?
That's okay.
I'm
Thank
glad to have you for another year. I got to type it in. But I do want to say, you mentioned that there's some of the benefits. It's funny. I was thinking about, I've put a lot of time in as Mr. McGowan as well on the school start times, and I did think about that. I mean, it was nice to see that the way the high school schedule worked out. It is kind of conducive to that research as well. But how do you feel, now going into, we're just into the second week now of this remote learning. Are you starting to feel a little bit better than maybe in those first few weeks where there's sort of, the new normal? Like, can you just talk about how you feel about this?
Yeah, I definitely like having the online classes now. Like, my schedule feels a lot more normal than it was when we had like optional learning being sent out through emails. Like, that was really chaotic when there was like, we weren't sure what we were supposed to do, but even if teachers are just gonna like I said, like come on to the video chat and we can see their face, and then they'll just like send out an assignment and we'll have like that hour period to like work on it and be like, okay, like I'm at school right now. It just feels a lot more like structured.
Great, thank you.
So for Julie, I don't know if you're getting this at all, but my brother's a teacher. He said to me, it was funny. He's like, in some ways, I think doing this digital learning is preparing students more than we ever thought, because more and more in the real world, it is about this. It's about being able to present on Zoom meetings. It's about knowing, when to speak when there's 20 people on there and how to speak and all that. And I don't know. I don't know if you're finding that at all, but like in many ways, this is as good as prep as you're going to get for real world business, because more and more, this is how I do most of my meetings, even before the pandemic. I don't know if you're thinking that at all. It's different.
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay. We appreciate you taking the time. You are more than welcome to stay and listen in if you want, or you can absolutely sign off and enjoy your night. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hope you all are doing well.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on. There's no continued business, but we'll go to the new business. As the new norm, I guess we'll begin with an update on COVID-19. Dr. Daly, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I think some of the things that we just discussed are sort of at the foreground of our conversation tonight. We're in the second week of our remote learning plan. I think it's going well from all reports, although, as I've mentioned in some of my updates to the community, that I'm also hearing from members of our committee have checked in with me, which is great, and also parents. My concern is that right now we're in what's called phase one, which is this structure where we are learning this system and we're doing remote learning, but we're going deeper with standards that already exist. And some of the gaps that exist right now among students that may not have device access or internet access at home or power at their home. Not everything we're doing is online, but a lot of it does require a device, and it's certainly helpful to have more than one if you've got siblings. Other factors, students with learning disabilities and the supports, we're giving as many supports as possible, but there's definitely challenges there. Another thought is, even just some parents who might have a challenge for any number of reasons, including that they're trying to work from home, that they're trying to manage 3 kids, that they're trying to, they're not trained as teachers, trying to work with their students. There's lots of different different challenges than at home. And when we talk about the digital divide, even economically, one thing that we never really factored in is that even those that can afford additional devices and support, right now you can't get these items from the stores. So that's something that we never really planned on when you talk about needing to do a rollout of devices. So we've been able to get out over 250 devices to families in need. We've been handing out devices at the school. Dr. Downs, Nan Cook, and myself, and all the principals have been helping kind of to organize to get people to fill out the form. And I've been delivering some and handing some out to people, and it's really, in some ways, it's a pretty neat way to meet people. Not that this week it's been interesting because it's, with folks coming up with masks and gloves, and we've been following all kinds of safety precautions. So you might not get to put a name to a face just yet, but it's been, I think people have really appreciated those devices and being able to have those in the school. So just the question that keeps coming up, a lot of parents will ask too, where are these devices coming from? So what we've done is we've taken carts that are in the schools and we've pulled them apart. And we've dismantled those carts because they were being used in classrooms. Obviously, without the classrooms in use, we want those devices in the students' hands that need them. So we've literally unwired carts, taken them and passed out those Chromebooks to people in need. And they're all signing, forms and understandings that these will be, safely cared for and returned at the end of the period of closure. But it's gone very well, and I appreciate everyone for their help with that. So as we move into this possible phase 2 of learning, I'd love to hear more from all of you about your thoughts about this. But we're certainly getting a lot of questions from teachers, from parents, and someone I was on a call this morning with our association leader, and he said when you talk about going into remote learning, it's similar to when you get a conversation going about homework. It's about 50%. 50% of the people think there's not enough homework being assigned and kids should be asked to do more. And the other 50% say it's too much, the kids need a break. And it's very similar, I think, with the remote learning. I think we're getting that sense that some feel like it's going about as well as it could, and people are feeling a lot of the pressure and they feel overwhelmed. And I think there's another group that says, come on, we're ready for more, we want to move on, we want to keep going. So as the schools and the principals, especially I think at the secondary level, and I'm willing to entertain if there's thought about even doing this differently, but I'm willing to entertain differences in moving into different phases of this at secondary, high school versus middle versus elementary. But there is a lot of discussion about this week continuing phase 1, but maybe thinking about next week or the week after moving into phase 2. We still wouldn't have I would not recommend having homework because I think there's more than enough. I think everyone's realizing, if I can try to sum up what people are feeling, this distance learning as a full method of trying to communicate is exhausting. And so doing a half day of school, it certainly feels like about 3 times as long as far as exhaustion goes, and you have these back-to-back assignments and responsibilities online. So the work would still be maintained within the periods just as it is now, but we may just begin to explore some new content. And as I said to the teachers before, we're going deeper with standards that we've already taught, but we're not turning the page in the curriculum. We're not moving on to new standards. We're not getting some new concepts. The suggestion would be for phase 2 to start to move into those new ideas. And so that's a discussion I want to have with the Administrative Council this week, but I certainly want your input as well. And the last thing I just want to update on at this moment, I think there's some other great things. The lunch program is continuing. We're handing out lunches. Anna McGovern and her crew are doing this every day. It's really fantastic what they're doing. And I just want to mention that the middle school DC trip is going to be canceled, and the company is canceling that as well. And Mr. Maloney and Ms. O'Connell, Dr. O'Connell, have prepared some letters and information to go home to parents. So I wanted to share that with everyone tonight. And I'm certainly open for any other updates or questions. Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add before we open up to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Daly. No, I think that was great. We continue, the business office operation continues to do a really good job working hard to manage the situation remotely, and payroll and payments continue to happen, bill warrants and payroll warrants, and I appreciate the committee being so continue to check in regularly with the business office staff and move that operation along. And as Dr. Daly alluded to earlier, we're certainly continuing to offer grab-and-go meals to really all families at this point. You know, they're in need of that, and Anna McGovern and food service staff certainly appreciate all of their efforts and the assistance with the custodial staff with the setup and clean up each and every day that they're operating the program. So there's a lot of good work on that front happening, and we'll be sending out a reminder this week that program is available, just to make sure all of the community and the North Reading Public School community is aware that is there if they need it. It's an ongoing enrollment and registration process. We just need to know some information from you, and you can start receiving that service. So, that's kind of it on the business side. Great, thank you.
Thank you both. So, I'm going to open up the questions. I'll kind of just go around the committee to begin. So, Chris, do you have any comments or questions?
Sure, Dr. Daly, I appreciate the update, and I really appreciate what you said. I thought it was important to kind of underline that while you come up with a great blueprint for how to phase things out, it doesn't mean that we, for the sake of consistency, have to have the high school at the same spot as the middle school, and maybe flexibility might be a good option to have there. I was thinking, if as long as there are strict guidelines about homework and about how intense to make the task in terms of difficulty and time, what are the reasons for not letting teachers, either by department or by individual, dictate when it feels appropriate to move into new content? Why have it be set to a school or a district?
So I would want to, at least at the entire level, like high school altogether, I would want them to all agree that it's the right time to move forward. My concerns would be, once you start moving forward, any gaps that exist right now, whether it be, like I said before, technology, socioeconomic, or learning supports that are needed, when you introduce new concepts and new content, everything, that those gaps widen. And so that's just a concern. We need to be able to make sure that we're scaling up and the supports are working. So, week one was really just getting a feel for it, getting a handle for it. I sent out a couple of updates on this to my teachers, and a lot of my special education teachers wrote back and said, thank you for recognizing this, because I've been talking to parents who are very frustrated, and they're trying so hard to work with their students, and it's just, there's just so many additional challenges in some homes, and we just want to be very cognizant that if we do move on, that we're not leaving folks behind. And so, I trust my principals that they're going to get a great feel for this from their teachers, from their parents, and their students, about whether they're ready to try something new, and what that looks like. And I think everything we do, we just move ahead slowly. I think one of the big messages too is that, we're not trying to replicate school, and we're not necessarily going to get to that same exact place that we get to every single year. And if we're trying to do that, it's going to be a disservice to the students. We need to continue some learning. We need to challenge them, have some new ideas and some new exploration. But we have that flexibility needs to be key. And I think the main questions that we received in week one were all about flexibility. Whenever someone thought it sounded too rigid, we needed to come back in and say, no, we can make that work for you and your schedule. I mean, just an example, if you've got two parents that are on the front line as essential employees, and they say, you know what, when I get home at 6 o'clock, I want to work with my students then and not during the day, then I think that's fine. That needs to be something that works for that family, and I think we need to be flexible that way. So I think that's really it, Chris. We just want to make sure that when we do move ahead, that we've got everything in place with our student support system to make sure that everyone's supported and to move on. And it really was the recommendation from the state was to do the teacher learning piece, and a lot of districts have agreed that that's as far as they would go. But there's other districts, and we're among them, that have said from the get-go that if this goes on longer than a few weeks, we want to make sure that we continue to do what's best for our students in our community, and make sure that we can work together.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a fair answer.
Thank you, Chris. Rich, any comments or questions?
Yes, thanks. Dr. Daly, do you have any sense of, you sounds like you guys have done a great job of getting devices into people's hands and whatnot. Are you aware of students, especially at the high school, middle school level, but really any students who may have, who aren't really reachable or who are still struggling in ways that they might not be under normal circumstances to access this learning? Is there a significant number, or are you aware of a number, or what's your sense of all that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question, Rich. I think my sense is that we've done a very good job of reaching a lot of people. From the number of surveys that I received back, I think we've hit just about everybody has filled out that survey. We did a two-pronged approach, so the teachers and principals also reached out to families. And the teachers and principals are also aware of folks that there may be a language barrier, there may be a device connectivity issue, where they're not able to complete the survey to get the information in. And so teachers and principals have assisted in helping families to complete those surveys to get the information in. I know that we've worked with some families that weren't able to complete the survey for any number of reasons, and we've been able to do that with them, fill it in over the phone. In some cases, they haven't been able to pick the devices up, so we can deliver to their homes. And I do think, I think we've got some great teachers that are very, tuned in to the needs of their students. And I'm very confident that we have hit just about everybody that needs that. We had a good number the first couple of weeks. I think once we announced the remote learning plan, we had a huge surge. So last week, we doubled the amount that we had out there over a couple of days, and it was huge. All different students that were applying, and some students, some of the parents said, that they feel like they can afford a device, but they couldn't get to a store to get one. Is it okay if they borrow one? Lots of parents said that they want to make sure that these are going to those families in need, and they don't want to take them away. But we were able to support all those families as well, because I think many of us have been in this situation now. We have maybe the parents have a computer and the kids have a computer, but you got 3 kids, and mom and dad are both trying to teach or work from home, and all 3 kids are on the computer. So having a few extra devices now to share. I think people also realized too, when they started to do some of the remote learning, that their, the specifications of their device may not have been the latest version or up to speed, and they weren't able to keep up with the assignment. So getting a device from the school is pretty good. Out of the survey, we had over 99% that were able to have connectivity at home, and those that said they didn't have it, we reached out to them and included follow-ups at the school level to remind folks that there are free options from many of the internet providers, and that there are many ways to get connectivity at this point. And so we've been working to close many of those gaps in our district as well. So I feel pretty confident that we've hit just about everybody. I think if we didn't, we'd be hearing directly from teachers about students who are not completing the assignment. And just to be clear too, because I followed up with a few parents about this as well, these assignments, although it's flexible, we consider the remote learning plan to not be optional. It's not something you can opt in or opt out of. This is the curriculum, and it's the same, it's required that the students attend school, and so this is what school is right now. I think within that, there's a lot of room for flexibility, and the teachers are aware of that, and the principals are aware of that. But in the few cases where someone said, I just want to do my own plan, I've spoken to those folks and talked about, if you wanted to fully do that, there would be more of a homeschooling option. But I've kind of counted it, and the folks have agreed to say, let's just work within the current framework and make sure that it's flexible. Because I can ensure that the plan, I've seen those plans, I know the teachers are carrying out those plans, and I know that those are appropriate grade level expectations for the students. So that's really the way that works. But as I mentioned, and I'll say it over and over, within those plans, there needs room for flexibility. I'm doing it with my own children at home, and our schools have been great. I think those things have been great as well. So.
Thanks. And regarding the thoughts about sort of moving on to new curriculum, would your thoughts on that change or that question become a little more intense if school closures were extended through the end of the year? I'm sorry, can you just repeat that question? Sure. So we were talking earlier about your thoughts on moving on to new topics or new subjects within a class, whereas right now you're just sticking with where they were at the time of the closure. So my question is, and you indicated that there's some discussion about moving on to new topics, and I'm wondering if the school closures were extended through the end of June, which is certainly a possibility. Would that intensify that sort of discussion of where do we need to end up at the end of June?
I think it would, Rich. I think that's part of what we're thinking about is if this goes longer than May 4th, we want to get as many students as possible to the best place as possible, and so I think that's our goal. Not trying to get exactly to where you would if you were in school for the full amount of time and delivering everything face to face, but I think we have a better chance of getting more students where they need to be. If we were able to have some ability to move forward, and I think again to do it slowly, not to necessarily slam our foot on the gas here and change it all up. I think everyone knows that we can just start to slowly introduce some new ideas. But again, there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen here, and I think certainly that's how we're approaching it. I think some districts may be taking this and then really just going deeper and deeper and deeper with existing standards. I think that we're going to continue to do that, but I think we will. I'm sensing that the teachers and administrators feel that we can introduce some new concepts and some new ideas, and and do this well for our students.
And my last quick question is for Mr. Connolly, just regarding the lunches or the meals. I can't remember if we talked about it last week at the workshop or our previous regular meeting, but since then, has there been an increase in the number of meals given out, or has it been pretty steady?
So we did re-advertise, and there has been a slight increase of about 10 to 15 additional meals per day, both breakfast and lunch. So we've gone from about 35 to about 45 on average each day right now. So there has been an increase. The DESC, I'm happy to also announce, has officially approved the waiver allowing all districts to claim those meals, and they're going to reimburse districts at the paid reimbursement rates, regardless of someone's eligibility or status. So that, from a financial perspective, that certainly helps. So there'll be some additional, federal reimbursement revenue by North Reading being a site. So we are officially going through that process to officially apply and get approved for that. So we are close to completing that process with the DESC, so we can claim the March mails and then continue to do that for April. So that's certainly a good thing at the state level that's happening. But we'll continue to make families aware with some reminders that that's available, and we'll continue to serve the needs of the program.
Great, thanks.
Janine, any questions or comments?
Hi. I had a couple of questions. I think Julie had mentioned something about the AP exams. Are they learning it on their own? Are they given sites, and are the exams going to happen? The AP tests.
Yes, the AP tests they're on a slightly different format and schedule. They've kind of given some real guidelines about what's going to be covered and what's not going to be covered. And there's some different options about how they're going to do that. The College Board has put a lot of funding and energy into making this work. for the students for this year. Those classes are a little bit different, and I mentioned this before. We did, because those students already, when they sign up for those courses, there's a little bit more on them to do some independent learning outside of what the teachers are providing. And so those students have been preparing and working for those all along. Ever since we went out on March 13th, they've been able to continue to do that learning on their own. But this, moving into a different phase, that would change a little bit of what the teachers are teaching and covering in the classes too. So again, Ms. LaPrette's been there right with us from the get-go, and we feel that our students are going to be well prepared for all those pieces.
All right, good. And then the other question is kind of like, you can't foresee the future, but if the school is continued to be virtual till the end of June, how does that affect, and this is personal development days? I'm sorry, professional development days, not personal.
Professional development days?
Yes, just out of curiosity.
I believe there's only one other day that's scheduled, and it's a half day, and that just would not be a professional development day. I believe it's May 22nd.
Yeah.
And that is the only remaining. Oh, actually, on June 5th also is a half day. So those days would not be. Those days would not be professional development days. Our remote learning plan includes professional development for teachers, and so it's already sort of built into our plan. And so those days that are in the schedule would just be full days of remote learning. They would not be professional development days.
Okay.
And that wouldn't impact our calendar because they're only half days.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the calendar. That's why I was just kind of like wondering. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Diana, any questions or comments?
Yes, I actually just had a couple of questions for you. If we move forward with the phase 2 of the plan, and I'm assuming that is the majority translated to new content, I'm assuming that across all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, that there would be an element of teaching on obviously the teacher's half of things, not so much, it's all been independent learning. In my experience to date, a lot of just assignments and sort of, it feels very much so like virtual homework. And I can only speak to the elementary level, but I was curious, are there going to be true lessons, or is that going to be the expectation of the parents?
Good question. Yeah, I would say that I don't know that your experience is the experience everyone's having. I think that a lot of teachers are doing some virtual reteaching or lessons or check-ins with students. What they're not doing right now is they're not introducing, here's some new content, here's a new standard. So there definitely would be that piece of it as well, more than just an assignment. I think there will be some teaching. The thing that it might not be, that a lot of folks might think it could be, is sitting down at a specific time, logging in to a live lesson. It may not necessarily be that, and that a lot of that is not even recommended just because of technology connectivity issues. But what you might see are a new lesson introduced by a teacher by video that then the students are clicking on and watching. So I think a lot of that is happening now, but it's not really teaching them and introducing something new. So when you say that your experience has been a lot of assignments that then parents are expected to do with the students, I hope for the most part that won't feel that way, and that's good feedback that I'll bring back to folks, because it's the parents' role is really to support to the best of their ability and to reinforce. And I know at the elementary level especially, I think it does feel a lot more like there's more explicit teaching because the students need more support, right, just in general, than they would at the other levels. And so, I'm anticipating that we may be a little bit slower to move and to roll into new content at the elementary level. I'm not entirely sure what our discussions are going to lead to. But I definitely think that your points about making sure that anything new that's introduced has all the support from teaching and guided support for students. It can't just be here's something brand new that the students have never seen before, and now the parents need to relay them. That will not be effective. So that would not be what we would recommend for sure.
Thank you. No, I actually, as a parent that is on that, those two different camps that you were communicating, struggling with just, lack of independence at that level and special needs, and two working parents, I'm actually an advocate of new content because I feel like all the work that you're putting into it and the struggles that you do have trying to comply is worth it, versus just, doing work that's already been taught. So I'm actually a big advocate of moving forward with that. One thing that my last question was just around grading. I know in your last email you mentioned that, there's really no test for that type of grading happening. If we roll out, the new content, is that when grading might apply? And please correct me if I'm wrong with the grading piece. One of the concerns I have is that if there's limitations of parents that are supporting children, is their grades going to be impacted when it's not really a reflection of them, but more so a reflection of their home environment and the restrictions on their support around them?
Sure. Good question also. So our plans before we would roll anything out would be to clarify all of this, but we would not be recommending that there's any kind of grading or anything that would really impact anything like a GPA or things of that nature at the upper levels as well. We would continue to provide standards-based feedback as we are doing now at the elementary level. We would continue to provide assessments and feedback on skills and at the secondary level, but it would not be necessarily translated into a number or a grade, and those grades and numbers would not impact the grades. So the high school, I've been looking at their plan today. By the way, I should mention too that the elementaries have finished their conferences. The high schools have a plan in place to have their conferences as well. We would come out with some clear language around third quarter ending. Third quarter is a little bit different because we had the majority of the third quarter was already completed, and now we've had some time for students to do some makeup assignments. And so that's happened, and third quarter will be clearly defined and delineated, and then what fourth quarter and end of year grades and all that makeup look like would also be communicated as well. I know the high school is looking to use some of the rubrics that have existed for quite some time at the high school about student expectations. So we still need to have that level of accountability, and certainly the incentive for students to do work. And without a grade, we don't want there to be a disincentive to be fully committed to the work. But at the same time, we're not going to introduce all the issues that surround grading and GPA and all that as well. So we would move forward with the content. We'd move forward with new learning, but we would not be pushing for grades or anything that's going to, in that sense, look just like school. Now, if we go back to school and we're face-to-face, we have to consider that as well, what that would look like, how much of it's a return to normal. But for right now, we're in this phase, and we're trying to think about what fourth quarter would look like and end of year would look like, and that's the plan that we put forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think Julie dropped off. Any members of the public have any questions? I have a few afterwards, but I want to open up to anybody from the public. I also think NORCAM was having trouble getting on, so I might email the link in a second. But I have a few questions to start. So number one, Dr. Daly, can you talk a little bit about MCAS? And, I believe it just MCAS is waived for the rest of this year. Is that correct?
So, yes, the commissioner has waived MCAS grades 3 through 10 for the year, and they're just waiting to get some more information about the competency determination, which is the requirement for students to pass that assessment in order to graduate. So they're just waiting for a little bit more with that, but they have not they've canceled all of the testing for all grade levels, including high school science, for spring of 2020.
Okay, and at a later meeting, I think we have to talk about graduation and all that. But for right now, one suggestion, and this kind of piggybacks on Diane a little bit. I think my wife and I are trying to help at home. My wife's doing 95% of it, so I'm not going to act like we're doing this equally. But I know if there is new content, one thing that I would hope is that there would be some sort of support for parents as well. I know that at the elementary, a lot of times with math in particular, a lot of teachers will send home, like, this is what we're doing, this is how you do the math. And so I think that would be particularly helpful, especially at the elementary level, that if they're, especially with math assignments in particular, if there could be some parent guides that are sent home as well. Not saying that parents have to be teaching it, but just thinking about that, and even potentially office hours for parents at the beginning of units, where, there could be videos geared to parents to help support the kids. Just a suggestion from me.
Yep, that's great. I'll pass that on as well.
And so you were mentioning, like, if we move forward with phase 2, would the structure be the exact same, or would the structure be different than? I mean, I think from what I've seen, I think the structure's been pretty good. I know that it can vary grade to grade, teacher to teacher, but overall, I feel like the structure and here's 30 minutes, here's 3 hours, here's 30-minute block. I think that's been delivered pretty well so far from what I've seen. So the structure remained the same. It would just be the content would be different.
I would say that would be the only real change. The structure would remain the same, and it would be just the idea of some new concepts and content. And in some ways, I mean, teachers may have introduced a new book, and they're still going to the same standard. So everything we do every day is new, even if we're revisiting something old. So there's certainly been new experiences and new ideas. This is really about moving forward with the curriculum, and that would be the biggest change that we might see.
Yeah, I mean, and my fear is, of course, equity issues, especially with students with student services that, people that help them. But with that being said, I agree. I don't think we can just review content for the remainder of the year if we're going to be in school or, doing any sort of assignments from home. And so, yeah, so I do agree that I think, soon we need to move on to new content. But, yeah, so that's all my comments and questions. Does anybody else have any follow-up questions? If not, actually, one follow-up thing for Michael. I will probably advertise as well, so maybe I'll connect with you, Michael, offline about the meals, because I do want to make sure that the community understands that even if you do not qualify free or reduced lunches, if it would be helpful, you can absolutely, reach out for a lunch, because if anything, it's not a burden on the school. It would actually be beneficial to the school, since we are getting reimbursed fully from DESE for those meals. And so if, you do have students at home and you would like a free meal, I mean, it's actually better for the school district, because people will be, coming in to make them anyways. And whether you're making 45 meals or 145, really is that much, the cost is that much different, and we get more reimbursement from DESE for that.
So, Mr. Buckley, just to that point, there's going to be an email that's going on at 9 a.m. that tomorrow morning that is a reminder to all families that, number one, all families are eligible, and just again how the program works, what time the pickups are, and how to just quickly register for that. But yeah, anything you can do to promote and advertise is certainly would be helpful.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, there's no vote needed on this.
I just think, to make it clear to Michael, folks, it's not a la carte, right? If folks are signing up, they're basically signing up for the program, right? We're not saying, like, I just want lunch this Tuesday. I want lunches as a part of the program. Is that correct?
That's correct. So they're kind of signing up, indicating that they either want a cold breakfast or a cold lunch, but they are kind of signing up, as part of the program, and we would then provide those meals on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next couple of days each time. That's how it's that's how it's functioning right now. So yes, thank you.
Okay. So moving on, we have the school calendar update, and we need a discussion and vote on this, Dr. Daly.
So thank you, Mr. Buckley. As was discussed a little bit at our last meeting, and I believe it was Mr. McGowan's suggestion, it's really gained some traction about, breaking up the vacation a little bit. I think we've certainly seen many more districts now go to where we were thinking North Reading was going to go, which is to not take the full week of April vacation next week and to power through. And many districts are doing something similar to, taking a day or a couple of days next week and then using those days at the end of the year to get out early. My recommendation is that we observe the Monday holiday, Patriots Day, which is a holiday for everyone, and then to also take the Friday of next week as a vacation day. I think it is an exhausting experience, as I mentioned earlier, and I think they have a couple of days. So basically, 2 extended weekends as a little bit of a vacation, and then they have the 3 days in the middle, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as full remote learning days. The reason why I would recommend doing the 3 days and not 2 and not 4 is just the way our schedule is designed. As I mentioned, we have some built-in professional development and learning that's scheduled on Wednesdays. And at the secondary level, we're certainly doing green days and gold days, or days, even days, and odd days. And so by having 3 days, it actually works out really well. You've got 1 green day, 1 gold day, and then also our remote professional development day, where teachers are collaborating and building on the lessons for the future. So that actually works pretty well. The other part that I would recommend is that we don't necessarily say right now that we're going to get out earlier, but we may also, we can't commit to the days at the moment because we don't know what beyond May 4th looks like. But in the chance that we do remain out beyond May 4th, we may very well need additional vacation days or additional breaks. For example, maybe that week of Memorial Day, which is May 25th, we may also say, let's take the 25th and the 29th and do another 3-day week there, and that builds in another break, basically another 3 or 4 weeks after the break we had. So my recommendation is at this time we would say for the April vacation calendar to be changed, and to say that we would take the 20th and the 24th, and the other 3 days would be released, and at the moment would be used towards getting out earlier. Right now, our last day would be the 24th, so we would get out 3 days earlier. But I just wanted to add the note that we might want to reuse those days for another break that we could revisit at a future meeting if the school closure is extended.
Thank you. Comments from the committee. Chris, we'll go in the same order again. Chris?
Sure. Dr. Daly, it was brought up by I want to say Mr. Buckley, but by other committee members, that I thought was a very good point previous to this conversation now, which was that in the event that schools do reopen, our days in our school calendar that are left of in-person learning are going to be more valuable than the days that we have right now. And that's what you kind of point on it. So is this suggestion of yours being made with a kind of a skepticism that we're going to be going back by the end of the year?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm really not sure. I think my honest opinion is it needs to extend beyond May 4th. I mean, just even the concept of coming back right now, the things we need to do to prepare the school, I think we might need some more time, and I do anticipate that there will be something longer. I don't know right now. There's really no indicators that would move beyond there. I think we still have flexibility about those days, and if we're in school these days, I don't know that necessarily means that we wouldn't be able to be in school some of those days in June. Like I said, we could use some of those vacation days if we decided that that's what we wanted to do. So I think it provides us a lot of flexibility to figure out how we can get students to where we need them to be by the end of this year, or at least to the best place possible by the end of the year. So I think there's some flexibility built in, but I wouldn't read too much into this decision. I think this decision is based upon the fact that we just got our remote learning plan up and running, and as we're talking about here, getting ready for some new content and moving into phase 2, and to just take the entire week off, we feel like we would lose a lot of momentum and steam. Seeing that we've been out of school since March 13th, we didn't want to do that too quickly. So.
Okay, thank you.
And Chris, I also think that theoretically, if it's going to be extended, I think they'll extend it, hopefully at least a week before the date ends. So, like, if we thought we were actually going back on May 4th, we could then at the last minute decide to take a couple of extra vacation days earlier. There's a lot of flexibility, I think, in when we did it, but
sure. Yeah, and ultimately, those decisions are really going to be out of our hands. It's going to be on the state level at least. But yeah, good for the idea behind it. Okay, thank you.
Rich, any comments or questions or thoughts?
No, I generally think it's a pretty good compromise between the two extreme positions. So
you like your idea?
I like my idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I took a poll with my work colleagues, and I think 5 or 6 people who answered, 5 said that the entire April vacation was canceled, and 1 said that they were going to do some kind of similar to what we're doing, just for reference sake. But so.
Okay. Diane has no questions. Janine, any comments or questions?
Did you hear me?
No, we did not. Go ahead. Repeat.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and for my thoughts, I like the approach. I think it's exactly what I would recommend. I think you take it right now, and I don't think we commit to whether or not we just get out 3 days early, 2 days early. I think part of this is we've only done this for about a week and a half, and so I think it's very hard to know how this is going to go. And it might be that there's a lot of frustration, and we feel that building up, and so it might be nice to have a couple of 3 or 4 day weeks ahead. Or it could be that people just kind of want to get out early. And so, personally, I think with a week and a half of data underneath our belt, it's really hard to decide how this is going to go. And so I like the idea of keeping the flexibility. So I would say that, I would announce this happening at April break and just say, we haven't yet determined those other 3 days of what's going to happen to them.
It all depends on how nice the weather is in June.
And well, if we can even get outside in June. So we'll so for purposes today, I think we just need a motion to revise the calendar just to say that, add back to revise and say that we are not going to be observing an April break on April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and those will be, whatever they're called right now, digital learning days, I guess. A motion for that, if that sounds okay to you, Dr. Daly?
Yes, remote learning. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can do that, Scott. I move that given the school closures due to COVID-19, we amend the calendar for 2019-2020 to change April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd to remote learning days and take the Patriots Day holiday and a school vacation day on April 24th.
My second.
Okay, so roll call vote. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, everyone.
Who seconds that motion?
What was that? Chris.
Yeah, Chris had that.
Chris, pop up something.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Buck.
You're welcome. Okay, moving on. So we now have the public hearing. So I don't think I need a motion. I think I just have to say that I'm opening the public hearing for fiscal year 2021 budget at 7:24 p.m. And with that said, I turn this over to Assistant Superintendent Connolly.
Thank you, Chairman Buckley. So we do have a brief PowerPoint to kind of frame the conversation today. And we're going to try to move through it relatively quickly. I know we've presented the budget a couple different times in public at this point. So, but I am going to essentially the topics I'm going to review today are essentially the touch upon the FY21 budget drivers, which we've talked about, but I'll kind of highlight what the main drivers are in the FY21 budget. I'll talk about the recommended new positions in our original budget proposal, and that I'll touch upon the new positions that we had advocated for in our recommended budget to the school committee. I'll talk a little bit about the numbers and go over the operating budget summary. And then I will talk about the current budget gap and how we go about balancing that proposal. And then at the end, talk about some budget conclusions, potential budget risks, and what our next steps are. So Patrick, if you want to scroll down, move the presentation down to the budget driver slide. Perfect. So as you know, we had 5 major budget drivers. The first being our contractual salary obligations. So certainly with a school department budget, over 83% of our budget is personnel services and salary obligations. So it's not unusual that that's going to be probably the largest budget driver. So as we look toward meeting our contractual obligations with our staff and our bargaining units, as well as looking to move the district forward with new positions and adjusting some staffing for changes in enrollment. Our contractual salary obligations are certainly a big part of the budget this year. Enrollment needs, even though enrollment is relatively staying stable, there are some increases at the elementary level. The middle school level is staying about the same, and the high school level is going down. So district-wide enrollment, we're down slightly, but the elementary enrollment, particularly in the primary grades, is on a rise, mainly due to a very large full-day kindergarten class moving up to grade 1. So we have included some additional staffing in our recommended budget to address enrollment at the elementary level to maintain the optimum class sizes that we look to maintain. That's always a big budget priority. Year 5 NRPS 2021, these really guide our new positions, our new initiatives. It's our strategic plan. So in a moment, I'm going to highlight some of those new positions that were included in the administrative recommended budget, which we've talked about in the past as well. So I'm going to talk about some of those new positions guided by our strategic plan. And then operationally is always a major budget driver. We certainly have fixed cost increases to adjust to certainly our obligations for building maintenance areas, for our HVAC contract, plumbing, boiler repair contract, wastewater treatment plant operations, both our regular and special education busing program, utility rates, electricity, gas, water, all these rates kind of go up annually, and we need to adjust the budget accordingly. So that's certainly always a driver of the budget. Then our special education costs, so certainly funds to support both our in-district special education programs, certainly need to be adjusted from an ongoing basis adequately to meet the needs of students, as well as our out-of-district costs for educating students when appropriate outside the district for private day and collaborative tuitions and transportation costs. So our budget proposal, I'll just note, did include a reduction in our out-of-district costs, mainly because we are looking at having less students due to some students aging out of certain programs, some students we anticipate coming back in district, educating outside the district. So there actually is a reduction in the out-of-district tuition and transportation lines. But at the same time, there's certainly needs in district to move our in-district programs forward. We've certainly allocated resources to provide additional student support services, in particular in the areas of increased social and emotional support. And all of these programs, in-district programs, all work to meet the needs of our students adequately, as well as reduce the need for outside placement in special education services. So these are the 5 major budget drivers. Patrick, you want to go to the next slide? As a highlight, the 5 major categories, I think you can kind of see that the budget drivers at play somewhat. So certainly salaries, as I mentioned, the biggest driving factor there, 83.6%. We have our out of district tuition costs, which is a small piece of the at 5.3%. That's actually down about 1% from last year due to the anticipated savings in the out of district tuitions by having about 5 less students being educated outside the district. Transportation has stayed about around 1.1 or 1.2% in this allocation. Our operations and maintenance is slightly up from last year. I think we're in the about 5.5%. We're up to 6.1 of our budget allocation, and that's just mainly to address needs around increased utility costs, increased wastewater treatment contracts, HVAC, heating and cooling, plumbing. Those needs certainly are go up each year that we have to adjust to as well. And then our instructional expense budget is somewhat up. It's been relatively consistent around this percentage point, but we're certainly trying to reallocate resources to make sure the school discretionary expense budget for instructional materials, textbooks, instructional technology are adequately funded.
This call is now
as well as a need to fund technology as well is a big driving factor there. But overall, these don't change significantly from year to year. These scenario breakdowns. So, Patrick, do you want to go to the next slide? I'll talk about some of the new staff positions that were recommended in our proposal to the school committee. So we basically were looking at 6.5 new positions, all driven by both really to meet our budget goals that we set at the beginning of the year. So we had the need to make adjustments due to some increased enrollment at the elementary level. I spoke of that earlier. There's certainly a high kindergarten class moving up to grade 1, so there's a need to add some sections at grade 1 to meet the demand of kindergarten, the higher kindergarten class coming in. There's a slightly reduced kindergarten class next year, so there might be a little bit of savings there with teachers moving up to grade 1. But overall, we're looking at about 1.5 of new FTEs to adequately meet and maintain the appropriate class sizes we're looking to maintain. These next 3 are really driven by our strategic plan and NRPS 2021 initiatives, which focuses on the teaching and learning strategy. You may recall we started a initiative last year to add some academic teaching in the areas of foreign language and STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, curricular areas at the middle school. That was really a 2-year plan to meet some initiatives in expanding foreign language and expanding offerings in the STEM curricular areas, as well as helping the middle school kind of structure and redesign their schedule and develop some staffing efficiencies with a schedule that's more consistent amongst the 3 grades, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So we really see that as a level services need to continue the effort that had begun last year. It's also part of our strategic plan. These next 2 positions were positions that we have presented and recommended previously. They're priorities in our strategic plan. There are many other positions that are a part of that strategic plan. These were 2 that were among the highest of priorities by the administrative team. The elementary teaching and learning coordinator and the reading specialist, both initiatives at the elementary level that we have recommended before, but have unfortunately, as the budget has moved through the deliberation process, we've fallen short in the funding area. The teaching and learning coordinator, and it would be an administrative position that would assist the 3 elementary school principals in providing support in the areas of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and administration, as well as additional support around supervision and evaluation. The reading teacher at the elementary level would help these schools more fully implement response to intervention strategies. It would certainly allow each school to provide the supports necessary to students across all grade levels. The final position there was an operational need. that we came very close to funding last year. We didn't quite make the list as it moved through the budget process. We do still see a need in an additional floater custodian. It would be overtime savings, so we're asking for a funding of about half that salary of that position, with the additional amount coming from a reduced overtime cost, and it would allow us to stay within the appropriate cleaning to square footage area industry standard ratios. It would allow us not to fall behind when we may not be in full complement of staff. We'd be able to stay on top of the task in the square footage area, really across all 4 campuses. So all in all, we were looking at 6.5 FTE positions. This was a little over 483,000, and the strategic plan positions, when you include the middle school academic teaching positions in that number, were a little over 313,000, which essentially represents about 0.9% of an increase of our total 4.5% recommended budget increase to the school committee. So kind of go to the next slide. If we look at the numbers, I just want to summary where our ask for the general fund, which is the amount we would ask the community support at our annual town meeting, the local appropriation was $33,199,530. That's a little more than $1.4 million higher than FY20. It was a 4.5% increase over fiscal year 20. That doesn't quite tell the full picture because, as you know, we have a variety of budget subsidies in the areas of our federal and state grants, our revolving accounts to which we assess a user fee or a tuition cost to some of our optional programs like full-day kindergarten, preschool, athletics, extracurricular, busing, performing arts, etc. They all work to help bring in an additional $3.2 million of additional revenue. The largest piece of that pie is the state program known as the Special Education Circuit Breaker Program, which helps provide a level of reimbursement to our special education costs that qualify, mainly our out-of-district tuition costs, which we've reached a little over $1 million as we look at that offset for next year. And then we look at what our total school funds are. We look at our general fund, our operating budget that we would go to the community at the annual town meeting for support. And when you include our grants and our revolving accounts, we're looking at a school department all funds budget of a little more than $36.4 million. And then we continue to get a tremendous amount of support by the community, by parents, by local businesses that support, and we accept donations on an annual average of $250,000. And then our 5 parent organizations and PTOs and PTAs that provide schools help support class field trips, classroom supplies, enrichment programs, technology supplies. They just do so much for the schools. We couldn't make the North Reading experience what it is today without the support of all of our booster groups, as well as our 5 PTOs and PTA organizations that help support an annual budget of about $75,000. So all in all, this is, all these things certainly go into the, making the North Reading budget from a funding perspective, and the North Reading educational experience is what it is, has been today. So if you go on to the next slide, what I want to talk about, and we had a budget workshop, as you know, on April 1st, where we stood at that point in time and what the budget gap was, and we sort of workshopped to this number. So this is the budget gap that would get us based on our recommended budget. And as you know, we looked at a few different scenarios between our recommended budget and what was level services, and recommended was about 1% higher than level services from a percentage basis to our budget. But we, based on the revenue plan as it was presented to us at the beginning of April, we have a slight update to that, which I'll get to in a moment, based on a finance planning team meeting that took place Thursday last week. We were about $585,381 short of a recommended budget, and about $324,000 short of a level services budget, which we workshopped to April 1st. So certainly, any reduction to what we're recommending is challenging, and it certainly creates a lot of debate and difficult decisions as the administrative team and the school committee, work, in the coming weeks to set priorities and make some very difficult decisions. We were notified at the finance planning team certainly we're in a very unprecedented situation, as everyone can certainly appreciate, with what the state faces, with what the nation and then the state and then the local districts on the micro level certainly face in the coming weeks, in the coming months, with our response to any impact to the COVID-19 virus. And I think it's fair to say what we sort of heard from town officials, from finance committee, at the finance planning teams, the chairs and vice chairs of our select board, our finance committee, our school committee, and certainly our town administrator and town finance director, who are working very, very hard to navigate a very difficult situation and a very unpredictable financial terrain that we're faced with, to try to make an FY21 budget work with some very difficult unknown assumptions. So, I think it's fair to say there's some additional work to be done. But what I'd like to do, Patrick, if you want to go to the next slide.
Just 1 second. I just want to add in that $585,000 deficit. So that was, as Michael was saying, that was the previous finance planning team meeting that before our budget workshop. At the last one, the numbers, it looks like I think we're about at the last one, the recommendation was to keep local receipts level from FY20 to FY21, and to keep state aid level from 20 to 21.
Correct.
That accounted for another perhaps $153,000 of cuts.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I will tell you right now that it might be worse than that, because frankly, there were concerns that even keeping state budget, numbers level, or even local receipts level, with what's been going on and the impact of the economy, might not be enough. There was numbers thrown around about seeing a budget decrease of 3 to 8% from FY20 to 21. So that's where, just to throw in here, this 585 number, realistically, we're $153,000 away from even being there. Sorry to interrupt you, Michael.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Buckley. That's exactly what certainly occurred on Thursday. So what I would like to do is, at least for the time being, is walk through, certainly for the community that may have not been at the April 1st budget workshop, what the administration, there's one slight change which I'll get to, but what the administration recommended in workshop to the committee. At that workshop, I'm working off a higher number now because I'm working off our recommended budget. We would kind of workshop to the level services at that meeting. But what I would like to do is show you the impact of some of the positions and what would be to the budget to balance that original number. And as Mr. Buckley just alluded to, this would not quite meet the requirement of the revised revenue plan, given the uncertainty that does exist in conversations with both state and local officials. We feel like they have to certainly back off on some local receipts and back off on some state aid. And we would be about an additional, at the moment, about $153,000 still short of an FY21 balanced budget. So when the administration kind of presented this list that's before you on the slide, certainly none of these, this is always a very difficult process, putting any type of position that we were very hopeful of achieving, whether it had been a new position that I just walked through a moment ago, or a position that we have currently that we may need to do without for a period of time, is certainly not where we want to be. But we certainly try to, when we approach putting together a list like this, we always try to do so in such a way that would be certainly a least harmful situation to the academic classroom. We don't take the reductions of staff lightly, or reducing reductions in force decisions, reductions in staff. So we've certainly tried to do that in such a way that would minimize that impact to the greatest extent possible. So the first three positions on this list, I just positions that were part of our strategic plan or a new position that we were hoping to achieve operationally. So the first three that we would put on here would be positions we don't have now. As I just said, these are not positions that are people that we have today, but they would be positions that we were recommending that we would then certainly defer or back off from being able to fund in FY21. So that would be the elementary teaching and learning coordinator, the reading specialist. Those were the two identified priorities by the administrative team in NRPS 2021, and it would be the floor custodian that we were hoping to achieve. So we'd have to wait to do those three positions. We then have three positions. This next position is a position that, again, we don't have currently, but you may have. I've been presenting budget updates throughout the fiscal year, and we had two folks in central office that left at the end of last year, at the beginning of this fiscal year, for a variety of life-changing decisions and retirements and so forth. And we were not successful at finding the right fit for those positions, so we've been kind of doing without about a 1.75 FTE positions in kind of central office, sort of the data world, and we've been making those work with spreading some of these duties out against existing staff, or in some cases contractually, small amounts of money for certain hours to get some of this done. And we were hoping to kind of take those duties and consolidate that into another central office support position that would be a combination of what that 1.75 FTE did from the data standpoint, for some human resource, personnel-related duties, and make that kind of a one position. We worked hard as a central office team to develop a job description. So what this would mean is we would defer or not go forward with that position, and it would mean we would continue to do what we are currently doing to fill this need and the responsibilities from a data perspective and an HR perspective. The next two positions are positions that are, some are at a district level, one's at the middle school, that are academic teaching positions. There are folks that are due to retire, and we would sort of defer the hiring of these positions and look to sort of certainly fill the void, in some cases by trying to reallocate additional resources. And when we would do that, the desire, the goal would always be not to impact as much of the classroom operation and class sizes as we can. And certainly there's some challenges with recommending this or not having these two positions. Challenges on the technology integration and specialist side, or technology support and dealing with technology tickets and so forth. But we would certainly try to be as creative as we can to fill this void by the loss of these two positions. It would not mean a loss of a staff member there, or a staff that would not lose their job, since this is due to certainly a savings due to attrition. So that's where those two positions stand. The next position, which is the seventh position on this list, is we had recommended in a grade level position at grade 1 at one of the elementary schools. The enrollment there, we felt kind of warranted that, not to try to put a primary grade at an enrollment level potentially above 22. And that the enrollment is always the increase from kindergarten to grade 1 is somewhat a moving target. So this would certainly we would not fund that position, and there's a chance we might be dealing with a little bit of a higher enrollment in that cohort of students than we'd want, and we'd have to certainly watch that. Current numbers would show that the enrollment would be around 21 students, but there was a chance with new move-ins and so forth, folks either going to private kindergarten situation or something to that effect, the enrollment might increase. So that could be certainly an impact on class sizes in the primary grade level at the elementary schools. The next two areas are not in the personnel areas. We had added a $50,000 line item to help support the one-to-one program that we've fully implemented this year from grade 7 through grade 12 with the Chromebook devices. We were looking to move that initiative from what has been a capital initiative to an operating initiative in FY21 because it's really embedded as part of our curriculum. This would defer that at least one more year. We are somewhat okay for FY21. It's not the worst thing, as we all know, and we've all learned how important technology is, certainly in the last several weeks, more than we even had an appreciation for just a few short weeks ago. Because we do have grant funding from an earmarked state grant that we still have availability towards that could be made to fund replacement in this program to fund the new incoming seventh grade. So it's not the worst thing that we'd have to defer that. It doesn't have the largest of impact. We're still about $53,800 short, and I think when I presented it, I made a mistake, quite honestly, at the budget workshop, and I presented that to the $324,000 number, forgetting that $60,000 was not in the level services budget; it was in the recommended budget. So when I went back after that meeting and reconciled, I still discovered that we were actually still $53,800 short. So what we're proposing tonight is we'd have to look, and we've done this in the past, at other expense areas. We'd have to look at some what our staffing turnover attrition savings are. I think we could maybe pick up an additional $20,000 to $25,000 by being a little bit more aggressive in our attrition assumptions of staff turnover savings. And then we'd have to look at certain lines, non-educational lines, some areas around, district supplies, some legal costs and costs in some certain areas to balance off the budget. And I can, certainly in the workshop, I can provide a little bit greater detail on areas we would look to, but they're all areas we've certainly looked to in the past. So a combination of doing these things, had the revenue plan not changed on last Thursday, with reducing these 7 positions, would mean we would have had a balanced budget, and we would have essentially had, an FTE standpoint, almost the same amount of FTE, a slight reduction in what we have today. So what this budget does fund in the sense of new positions is it does fund some new elementary positions due to enrollment situation, not to the extent we desired, but it does address some areas. And it does fund the 2 academic middle school positions to achieve the foreign language expansion in some of the areas that we began last year. Those were really 2 areas we felt we could not go, given we didn't want to take a step back at the middle school curricular program, and we didn't want to put any more risk with the elementary class sizes by going any further reductions there. So that's kind of where we would stand. And again, I'll just remind everyone that we're about $153,000 short, that we'd have to go back into the drawing board. We have a workshop scheduled later on and start looking at other areas. But from a budget conclusion standpoint, I presented this slide in the past. So what does this kind of revised budget do? Well, I think it achieves what's in the black font, where it certainly still allows us to meet our contractual obligations with employees and employee unions. We certainly need to make sure we do that. It does, to a certain extent, maintain some additional staffing to maintain sound student-teacher ratios, particularly at the elementary level. Although there's a little bit more risk in that now than it was previously. It does move forward with the secondary level middle school program, as I just mentioned, and expanding foreign language and STEM. What it does not do is these red areas to what we had hoped. It does not provide the administrative support for the elementary teaching learning coordinator and the curriculum professional development supervision and evaluation area. It does not add an additional Fuller custodian to help us really be well positioned to meet the operational needs of all 5 schools. Although I do think we're making do with pretty well with what we have. That that would have been great, and it would have really allowed us to be in good position to deal with when staff are out and to be able to adjust to those needs. But we would continue to operate as we've been operating, and I think between contractual services and our in-house cleaning staff, which continues to do an exceptional job, I still feel like we're going to meet our operational needs, certainly. And it would delay moving this initiative into the operating budget. And with an additional $53,000, what that really does is just elevate some levels of risk in certain line items based on unknowns or uncertainties or dealing with the unforeseen. But overall, I think it does allow us to meet our operational costs to maintain the 5 schools and surrounding campuses. So if you go to the next slide, which I do want to touch a little bit upon financial risks and this new COVID-19 environment that we're dealing with. So this certainly one of the biggest areas of unknowns in any budget, or biggest variables in the school department budget, is there's always the level of inherent risk always exists, and there's always the potential for outside placement that exists today, and it will always be there. And that number of those can change quickly. Despite where we're at, and certainly there's going to be challenges in the weeks and months ahead. I still think we're in a relatively solid position to deal with some unforeseen costs in this area. Town was very supportive in adding a stabilization budget to address some unforeseen special education costs last year at town meeting, with some seed funding that is available. And we're hoping to meet our obligation. I think we will at this point of the payment of tuition that we're legally able to do. I still think we'll be able to meet that. And our circuit breaker funding at the moment is in very good financial standing. So I think it's an area of risk, but I'm not super alarmed at the moment. Our revenue estimates may not meet projections, so this is certainly an unknown. I think as we evaluate the extent of the closure, once we know what that is in the coming weeks, will it go beyond May 4th and so forth? I think we'll know what the right thing to do here is in terms of issuing potential refunds for disruption of service. I think it's fair to say in certain programs, some refunds may be necessary, and we want to certainly do the right thing there. But certainly that may have an impact on meeting some revenue projections. I'm not at a point right now where I'm definitely alarmed. I want to start changing some budget subsidies, amounts, and offsets from FY21, but the risk is certainly there, and it's going to certainly be a need to take some really close look at that in the coming weeks. Teacher attrition savings, so it might be taking a little more risk on by trying to balance that remaining $53,000 at the moment with some additional assumptions here. Nothing we haven't done in the past, but the risk is certainly there. Utility costs can be variable. Carryover assumptions, again, this kind of goes hand in hand with the second bullet. If we do start issuing refunds, that we may have a challenge meeting some of the assumptions we made early on in the budget process by what our revolving funds will look like. Snow and ice remains uncertain. We've dealt with more and more unforeseen building maintenance needs, particularly at the elementary schools, in certain areas around boilers and electricity needs and plumbing needs, as those buildings certainly are the older buildings. And our food service program certainly is in an area where we're not taking in a lot of revenue. We're not taking in any food sale revenue, so we're losing a lot of revenue this year. There will certainly be less reserves, and certainly a balance in this account at the end of this year. There's no possible way of avoiding that. Every district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if not the nation, will be dealing with that. And North Reading will not be unique in that. And so just overall, there's going to be less reserves to maybe address unforeseen. So, yeah, I'm saying all these to alert you, and it's nothing that I don't think I haven't said before, but certainly the COVID-19 and the situation we're in has all certainly heightened, these areas, which I think we all can appreciate. If we go to our last slide, and I'm certainly open up to questions and discussion. As we go to the next steps, we're going to certainly have continuing discussions with the finance and planning team about available revenues. I think we're going to meet almost weekly or every 10 days or so in the coming week. We know we have more work to do now based on the meeting that happened on Thursday, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts in that meeting and the efforts that certainly Michael Gilberto, town administrator, and Liz Rourke, who are working tirelessly to try to mitigate the situation that we're in. So there's certainly some difficult decisions to be made. We have another budget workshop on April 29th. I think that will certainly be necessary as we know there's more work to do. So I think we'll have the good thing about the April 29th date is we'll have one more finance planning team meeting prior to that, where we'll be able to see if anything changes and maybe be workshopping maybe a more firm number. The school committee was set to vote on May 4th. Now, there could be some flexibility there with the uncertainty around the town meeting date, but at the moment we'll still operate that we'll plan to vote the budget on May 4th, and then we'll do the present to the finance committee on May 6th. Town meeting is still June 8th right now, and then we'll certainly await what's going to happen at the state level. As the situation is currently at, any impact to FY20 will certainly have a compounding impact to FY21. That's just the reality. If there happens to be some statewide cuts that come down and actually impact FY20 in the form of what's known as 9C cuts, mid-year cuts to state aid, that will have a compounding effect to FY21. So as Mr. Buckley alluded to earlier, we're looking at between 3 and 8% of state revenues being down. So we're going to have to watch that conversation very, very closely. And then we'll continue to have a very healthy discussion in the weeks ahead. And there certainly will need to be difficult decisions in this climate. But I remain hopeful and confident that all the folks involved at the town level, the school level, the local level, certainly all of you on the school committee and Dr. Daly and our administrative team will work very, very hard to develop a budget that will work for North Reading and try to minimize any impact on the educational experience. With that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. Just because I want to add one thing and then open up for questions too, but just on the schedule, there was talk at the finance planning team meeting about possibly town meeting being pushed back even further, because obviously this is an unusual time where nobody really knows how long this is going to go or the impact. So our timelines maybe get pushed out a little bit. They were even saying, there's even the possibility of not funding a full year at a time, but just kind of opening up that possibility. For comments and questions, I'm going to ask that we try to do it in 2 different phases. The first phase is comments and questions on the budget right now as what we've workshopped, sort of comments on that. This is a budget hearing. I do know there are some members of the public that are listening right now as well. And so we want to comment about that. And then when that is done, I would love to have a brief discussion with the committee members about guidance for the further cuts that are most likely going to be needed, because I have had a few members of the public reach out about some suggestions, which to be perfectly honest, I'm not in favor of, but ultimately the budget is the superintendent, Mr. Connolly's, and all of the school committees. And so I do think it's worth having, 5-10 minute discussion on a couple of ideas and potential further cuts that could be made. But first, I just want to go around and see if anybody has any comments or questions on the cuts that are presented in, in the PowerPoint that Michael just went over. Any comments overall on the budget? So I'll start with Chris again. Do you have any comments or questions?
No, not at this moment.
Great. Diana has nothing. Rich, any comments or questions?
So I have some questions. I don't know if this qualifies for the first part of your discussion or the second half part of your discussion, but they are along the lines of. So let's talk about custodians for a second. We prior to schools closing and certainly just after schools closing, schools have been undergoing
I believe we term them enhanced cleaning procedures. If that becomes the new norm, which is certainly possible, if not likely, will our current staff, without the floater custodian, be able to support on a full year basis that sort of enhanced cleaning that we have seen that's been necessary through the early days of this coronavirus situation?
Yeah, great question. And I think we certainly could. We have a very, very capable custodial staff. They do an exceptional job, and we worked hard at finding the right kind of allocation between the campuses and the schools to be able to address certain situations, and when there are staff that may be out for any reason, be able to be in a good position to cover those needs. I think it certainly presents some challenges, some additional challenges, and should there be additional kind of touch point type cleaning, that's certainly more than what has been standard practice. I think we could certainly be in a position to address those, but perhaps there could be a need for, number one, maybe some additional overtime costs in turn to hit some areas at times. I've certainly thought about that, and then potentially a need to at times supplement some services with some outside contractual services if needed. And I think we do have some available funding to address that, and we'll have to kind of just pay very close attention to it.
Thanks. So I guess overall, this our standard process, which is now just my second year of this, but it continues to make sense to me, and we'll work through whatever the number that the finance committee comes up with. But it's a little. The future is more opaque now than it ever is, and I just worry about things that we can't anticipate, or we can anticipate, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And that was one example, but I can come up with a dozen other ones.
Absolutely.
From additional professional development needed to enhance a potential, online, more prevalent online curriculum. I mean, there's 100 different things you can think of.
Right.
I guess it's too much in the future, too much in the unknown to address, but it doesn't feel like we have a whole lot of flexibility, especially since we're got to get to a newer, looks like lower number, to deal with any of the surprises that may come down the pike as a result of the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a fair question, and we was talked about it at the finance planning team as well. It was brought up, and certainly the areas you highlighted tonight is certainly areas that we certainly are becoming more increasingly aware of, that we have to take a much closer look at. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Janine, anything? Janine? Perhaps she dropped off or is muted still. So I'll jump in.
Sorry about that. I lost my screen. My question kind of has to do with the revenue plan that we see in finance planning, where they break out the cost of insuring employees. And if we said we wanted to hire, say, 10 employees, they kind of put that into our budget, that if we're not going to hire said 10 employees, will that money come out?
That's a great question, Janine. That's a question I had as well. My understanding is that
it very well could come out. So because of the fact that we're not funding any new FTEs under this revised scenario, I think the original revenue plan, as you just highlighted, did include the assumption that there would be some new FTEs, benefit eligible positions. So I do think that there will be potentially of a fixed cost reduction. So based on last Thursday, I think the 153,000 number was kind of like a worst case. And because there could be a fixed cost savings based on the benefit health insurance, it could be with the range. I think if nothing changes, but now, there's still some uncertainty, is probably between 75,000 and 153,000. But that's a very, very good point.
All right, thank you.
Excellent point, Janine. And that's something when I talked to Michael before, because we don't even know that number, I don't even think we can start thinking about the suggestion, other changes yet until we know exactly what that number is and what's included in it. But I just worry that, the big number is going to go up, and then hopefully that can offset a little bit of it. So my comments first. So first and foremost, Michael, thank you again for doing this. I know you spent a lot of time on this. Even though you tell me it was going to be 10 minutes, I won't hold that against you. The only a few comments first. Only positive that I really want to point out here is that included in this, which wasn't highlighted, but there are some members of the public here. This will be the fewest number of out-of-district placements for special education in a number of years. I think there's been a lot of work done to try to be able to educate our students within the district, and so I just want to make sure we call that out. I'm very sad that we are not even starting to address the full-day kindergarten expenses. That is something that I have been very concerned about. I will also say I'm very concerned if people hear this about next year, because I know there's going to be families that are in very tough economic situations, and I hope that if there are any parents that do want to send their kids to full day and they're struggling, that they reach out to the school and let us know, because I hate that if a student can't get the education that the parent wants to provide that they think is necessary. An advocate of full day kindergarten, I think many people are here, and I hate that we can't address it here, and I worry that fee will be a very high burden next year for some people. As I mentioned last time, this budget's not level services. We're not going to be close to level services, which is disappointing. But I think we all understand we're in an unprecedented time right now. Only other comment, I'm concerned about being able to balance this year, come out this year, without a huge loss. I know you mentioned refunds, and it's really tough. We're going to talk a little bit about the bus contract later, but that impacts it. The only real question for this part of it, Michael, is with regards to digital learning. I know some of the positions that are being cut are digital learning. This also came up at finance planning, and I'm just very nervous that if there is a need for this again next year, I think the fact that I think the foresight of a lot of the administrators in getting one-to-one devices as soon as we can, Brad Jones helping to, get that plan in place quicker, and having these digital learning specialists in the schools has really been beneficial, and we're seeing that benefit now. And I just really worry about how do we cope if we lose those positions, and how many are left, and where does that fall? I don't know if that's for you, Dr. Daly.
Yeah, it's a great question. It certainly came up last Thursday, and we still have a digital learning specialists. We would essentially be going from about 5 to 4 under this scenario. So I think where we would lose some of the support is certainly district level support, mainly at the secondary level, as well as that district level position also don't have data technicians, so that certainly would be more of a challenge to be able to address and stay on top of the various maintenance tickets that may come in really across the district. There's really more reliance to our network administrator who's addressing the needs of the entire network, to address some lower level maintenance tickets, as well as our data manager who's managing our system Zooms and helping with state reports and so forth. So that's kind of an impact kind of outside the classroom, but by losing sort of a district level position. And then we would certainly work to try to be as creative as we can with the technology team to minimize the classroom impact. But I think it's fair to say it's certainly going to have an impact. And I don't know if Dr. Daly wants to go into any more detail.
Thanks, Michael. If I can jump in. So as mentioned before, the two positions that are not to be rehired are both digital learning. But I had conversations with Dr. Downs and Dr. O'Connell, and our commitment overall as a district is to the expansion of the middle school program. And so we believe in that curriculum and that program moving forward. And so it's a difficult decision if we have to make it, but that's what we would do. And what that means is, like we often need to do, is we need to figure out, we have a lot of very hands-on administrators. We also have a very hands-on network admin. And it's going to be challenging to do this, but it means that Dr. Downs and myself and other people are doing more support than we're able to do currently. And we'll be creative. We'll try to figure out some other ways to have other digital learning folks pitch in a little bit more. But those are absolutely positions that we need to bring back. It cannot be a long-term solution, especially that K-12 digital learning specialist. Again, in a district without technicians, those folks are providing not only the digital learning support for our teachers, but they're also providing tier one, we'll call it tech support, fixing smart boards, fixing printers, getting into classrooms, installing software, and certainly with the one-to-one program, all the troubleshooting that needs to happen there to repair devices and get them back to using. These are the people that are doing it. So not a great area to be cutting in, but we will figure it out. Again, our history here and our preference, whenever possible, if we can not fill a retiring position as opposed to cutting another position, that is our preference, and that's usually what we try to do.
Thank you very much. So before I move to phase two, are there any other comments or questions from the committee or anybody in the public? Okay, so moving on, the other discussion I wanted to have very briefly, I have a couple members of the public reach out to me, and I do think it's worth at least discussing very quickly to see what the committee's thoughts are. But the one person reached out and knew that we were looking at hiring an assistant superintendent position, which I think we all are aware of. And their thought was, if the position is open right now and it's going to be a tough revenue year, whether or not it is prudent to hire that position or fill that position right now, and whether that could be delayed. And so I know that I talked to Dr. Daly, and I have my thoughts. I will hear first, but I want to hear other people's thoughts as well. I know that when I was talking to Dr. Daly, and I'll be honest, I've been learning what that position is more and more over the last couple of years. But I think, if the finance committee or the finance planning team decides that we think state revenue is going to drop by 10% and there's a 10% loss, I think every position is on the cutting block. So, this is just more for, if we're talking about another $150,000, where do we start with? And I would not propose starting with the assistant superintendent position. To me, I think it's a leadership position. I think you need leaders at the top. I think somebody hears assistant superintendent and they think that it's, an assistant role where there's somebody else that's the leader. But this position has been called different things over the last 20 years or so. It's basically been the director of curriculum for a number of years, and it really is, the leadership position in that role. So I'd be concerned about cutting a director type role. I think you need leaders in times that are tough, and I think watching Dr. Daly and Mr. Connolly both work in the last, couple of months has really shown how important leadership is. I think that teaching and learning is obviously a critical role in a school. I mean, if we're not working at educating our children, I don't know what's a higher priority role than curriculum. I think we're already taxing our administrators. I think some of the positions that are being covered in the central office, I think there's other positions that would put more responsibility on Michael in particular and Patrick as well. And so I think we cannot burn out these two gentlemen, and I worry that not adequately supporting them with the leaders they need would do that. I also think that the assistant superintendent position involves a lot of out-of-school, out-of-district meetings. And one of my huge concerns would be if Dr. Daly or a building principal was covering those meetings and there was ever to be, an emergency that happened in a building or in the district, and, one of the building principals was not there because they got sent to, Triton for a meeting. And, we needed that leader in the building and they weren't there. I would just regret that the rest of my life if they weren't there to, be part of that response. And so that's a very big concern I have. Right now, I think Dr. Daly is directly overseeing 30 people, and I don't think the superintendent can do that. I don't think it's good management. I don't think it's good leadership to overextend that. There are certain positions in the assistant superintendent role which requires, a first level of appeal, and then Dr. Daly would be the second level of appeal, and you can't, have Dr. Daly being both of those. And this is just not a position that we have, that you can just add in a few months. Like some people are thinking, well, we can add it back in October. Well, the people that are up for at least some of the candidates for the assistant superintendent position are building principals. The reason that we didn't hire it when Dr. Daly was appointed superintendent was we did not want to disrupt the building. To not do this now would mean putting it off another full year, which is, to me, unacceptable. We formed a committee. They did the work. They have great candidates. And so, to me, I think this is a position we need to move forward with. The other thing is we're going to talk about contracts in a little bit. I think that's another thing where, I know that it may seem tone deaf a little bit to be, talking about ratifying contracts, but at the same time, most contracts are not up right now, and they're going to be getting their standard step raises and, cost of living adjustments. I don't know that why we can't. I think we have to do it for all unions as well. But I am interested to hear from the other members of the committee if they also agree that we should prioritize keeping that assistant superintendent role, or if people disagree with that. And so I know that's a lot of information, but Rich, I know you usually are okay starting, so would you mind? Do you have any comments or questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I hate to say it, Scott, but I agree with the way you framed that almost 100%. I think that, as you said, given what we think now is going to be an additional, $100 and something thousand that we have to go to, that's one thing, and I agree 100% that I would, and correct me if I'm not catching what you were saying, but I think you were saying that given the additional $100 and something thousand we have to get to, this would not be a position I would consider cutting at this point. If the revenue drop is more draconian than that, then, as you say, everything's on the table. We'll have to sort of take a holistic look at everything. But I think that the experience, obviously, the whole team has been put through a stress test in the last couple of months, and while they've come through it admirably, the stress part of it can't be emphasized enough, and to think that stress would potentially be there for a full year, I don't see how you can expect people to maintain that. So I agree with your framing of all that.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and again, if we're talking about putting 28 kids in a first grade classroom, then it's a different discussion. But if we're talking about being able to maintain somewhat reasonable class sizes, and I think this is an important position. Chris, do you have any thoughts or comments?
I do thoughts. I mean, I think that there are well over a dozen excellent reasons why we really could staff the position right now. And I agree with Rich. That you stated all of them so eloquently. Something I can add to it, but yeah, you threw everything at the wall there, and I think those are excellent points. I hope that people take that to heart. It's an incredibly important position. It's one that has been getting done by a team of people ready to fill in, and I don't think that's a sustainable model. I think it needs a full-time person in there doing it and going in that position.
Perfect, thank you. Diana?
Yeah, so Scott, I am in complete alignment with every statement that you made in this regard, and I absolutely would not be in favor of considering to cut this position. I think it's a priority. I think we need to treat it that way. So thanks for, as everyone else said, articulating that so well. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. I did have time to prepare for this because people reached out to me about it. So, and then Janine, any comments? Are you in agreement?
No, actually, I think he shouldn't be replaced. I'm just kidding. I think obviously it needs to be filled and filled quickly. Curriculum is the driving force behind everything that the school does. And I have complete faith in Mike being able to be the wizard that he is and find any of the monies that we need to get that position filled.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and I think sometimes the public doesn't understand that. They see that Michael is the assistant superintendent, and they think, well, why do you need a second one? But I am impressed by Michael every day that I talk to him, but I don't think we're going to be sending him to set the curriculum for the district either. And so I think we all have different roles and different responsibilities, and I think we need that position in addition. This is not a reflection of, we don't have adequate people here right now. We've always had a different finance person and a different curriculum person. So, Dr. Daly, Michael, I don't know. I just think it was important, since some people have reached out to me, to at least have that discussion. But, I think the marching orders are clear that is a priority still.
Great. And I appreciate the words that everyone said. Having served in the position for 10 years, in one form or another, and knowing that the position existed for many years before, there's been a central office team of 4 with student support, finance, curriculum, and the superintendent. I can't imagine doing this job without it. I have essentially done 2 jobs since January for the reasons, as you mentioned, that I did not want to disrupt schools mid-year. I've had various folks filling in and doing quite a bit of delegation of some of the responsibilities, but on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of work that I do, and I like to remind folks too that when we think of it, a lot of folks don't understand what the position is. Curriculum is one piece, and unfortunately, one of my goals is to try and make it more about curriculum, but I've often said it's about 20% of what I get to do. The human resource part alone is huge. Everything from the hiring of new staff to getting people up and running in the mentor program, getting all of the lane advancements and things like that moved out. Without the HR position, without any advancements there, to do this coming into hiring season, it will be nearly impossible for me to do that and to do my job as well. This 6-month period here from January to June was a short-term fix where I took on additional work and responsibility in order to not disrupt the schools and to try to get the best pool of candidates. And it was something I was willing to take on because I knew it was best for the district, and I knew I would end up getting the best assistant. But I appreciate your support in recognizing how important this is to move forward as a position. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Any more comments or thoughts or questions from anybody on the public hearing? Okay, hearing none, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I appreciate everybody, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is employment contract. Dr. Daly, are you going to present on that?
So, thank you. We have shared with you tonight, there are contractual agreements with 2 groups, the custodians, the North Reading Custodians, and also the North Reading School Secretaries Association. And if these agreements are agreed to tonight, they will now be known as the North Reading School Administrative Assistant Association. And so what I've shared with you in your packet is some additional information about the specifics of their contract. They have been agreed to and ratified by the respective association, and the request tonight is to ratify. I know that we've shared these with you at executive session, and this would be the ratification of the full contract for both the custodians and the secretaries.
Excellent. So if we can maybe take these separately. So on the first one, the custodians, it would be, it's a 3-year contract. The cost of living adjustments over the 3 years are 2%, 3%, and 3%. So I can have a motion to approve the memorandum of contract with the custodians unit.
Scott, I move that the committee vote to approve the let's see, are we voting on the MOA or on the contract itself?
Patrick, is it an MOA or the agreement? The agreement, right?
This is the agreement, and then the contracts themselves would need to get pulled together. But this is the agreement.
Okay, the MOA.
Okay. So I move that we approve the memorandum of agreement between North Reading Public Schools and the ASME Council 93 Local 1703 Custodians Unit as presented.
A second.
Okay, so any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll do a roll call. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So it carries 5-0 unanimous. Thank you. And now we move on to the next one, which would be looking for a motion on first let me start with the memorandum of understanding. It is also a 3-year contract. There are cost of living adjustments of 2% each of the next 3 years. There is in year 1, there is an adjustment to the steps, which would add another step and reduce the first step. So it would be a 2.5% increase in the steps, but the cost of living adjustment would be 2% each of the next 3 years. Looking for a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with what would be now the North Reading Administrative Assistant.
I move that the committee vote to approve the memorandum of understanding between the North Reading Public Schools and the North Reading School Secretaries Association, as is currently known for the new contract as presented.
A second.
Any discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote again. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. This also carries 5-0 unanimous. Thank you all. Moving on, Superintendent's goals. Dr. Daly, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. So I have shared with you here tonight some documents related to my goals. It's been, as we've said, a little bit different than maybe I anticipated, and I'm doing things a little bit differently. So at least one of the goals is substantially impacted, and I've addressed that with you previously. But I did want to share that there are many things that I have been able to continue to work on. And so the document that's shared with you here is the Formative Assessment Report. And I wanted to just bring you up to speed. I won't spend too much time on this, but what I've done here is I've copied in each goal at its level and then gave a narrative update on where I am at this point in the process. So my first goal is very much about the continued highest level of effective strategic leadership for the North Reading Public Schools. As I mentioned previously, I was actually able to start the new superintendent induction program back in July. That was one of the advantages to being named when I was named, and I was able to start my cohort in July, even though I took over in January. So I've been very active with this group, the new superintendent induction program, as well as the Merrimack Valley Superintendents Association, Mass Association of School Superintendents. And I have, really come to know folks as we are doing meetings and Zooms and connections on nearly a daily basis. And I think a lot of that work that I've done there strategically with that group has been very helpful to me as a new superintendent. And I certainly feel that a lot of what I've been doing quite publicly, actually, more than I ever expected, to share unified messages from the Merrimack Valley Superintendents Association in respect to decisions to cancel school for the initial 2 weeks before the governor had declared that, were really lessons in leadership and quite substantial moves towards this goal. I also, one of the things most proud of, one of the responsibilities that I dedicated this year was the assistant superintendent responsibility of professional development days. There's a full school day on March 6th that's very, very time consuming and quite an investment of time. And I was able to meet and train with Mr. Clean, along with Nicole Orlando, my administrative assistant. She's actually the administrative assistant to the assistant superintendent. So the three of us worked together to come up with a plan, and I'm very proud of myself that I was able to back away from that day and really let Mr. Clean and Ms. Orlando do a lot of the work to get that day out of the run. That was one of the duties that I was able to share, and I'm very proud of that, and I shared that there. And continuing to improve professional development through my learning plan. The second goal is speaking about achievement for students at different levels. And so we did quite a bit of work in the first few months. I really changed some of the ways that we have our school meetings. I've had very different kind of structured conversations with the principals at every building about school visits. And I focused on this concept that when I visit their school, I'm observing the principal, observing the teachers. And that in some ways was a bit of a shift from previous supervisionary visits. And that's built on a model that is something that's out of the Department of Ed that we talked about in my new superintendent selection program. And so in addition to walkthroughs of buildings, which is a chance for me to be visible and to say hi to the students, I'm also in this role to observe the principals doing their job of observing teachers. And we're reflecting, what did we see? Do we agree? And we had a very good process that was going. We also added something else, which was just the idea of, everybody on Tuesdays would have a half hour where they were in classrooms. And this includes every administrator. We wouldn't initiate any new business. Michael would send an email. I would send an email. A principal would send an email. There'd be nothing new. And we knew that from 10:30 to 11 on those Tuesdays, we were getting into classrooms and walking through. And it's been wonderful. We were only able to do it a few times before school let out. But I got to do some walkthroughs with Cynthia Conant. I got to do some with Dan Downs, with Kathy O'Connell. I got around, we walked in small teams of 2 or 3. And I think everybody, teachers, everyone has just immediately picked up on just how much more visible we were with this initiative. And it's something that I certainly hope to continue when we go back. And we're going to actually talk about, what this kind of visibility looks like now that we're into our remote learning. There's ways for us to visit virtual lessons as well. And I know a lot of our administrators are doing that. So might look a little bit different for the next few weeks, but that's something we're going to continue with there. So I wanted to provide that update.
Patrick, one quick question. So on the handout, there are boxes for on target, off target, and not started. Were any of those, had you intended to check if you were on target on these goals or not? Print out.
Yeah, my understanding is that's what you folks would do. You folks would decide whether what I'm showing you is whether I am on target. I could certainly provide where I feel with those. I feel like I am on target with all of them, except for one that's a little bit different, which is the next one, a little bit, which is about the part of my entry plan, which was to put out a survey to the parents of the community about what they'd like to see in the schools. I've backed off from some of that. That would have been done right around the time that we went on school closure. And I brought this up in the previous meeting. My goal there is to, focus our communication on everything related to the school closing and our remote learning plan. And I did not want to, at this difficult time, ask folks additional information about, what they'd like to see in the schools and what they'd like to see from me. So that was the decision that I made that I shared with you that I think everyone agreed with. So that's why that is where it is. But I don't feel that we're very much off target from our original plan of, moving towards some reviews and renewals and updates of RPS 2025. I still think, I'm collecting a lot of data. It's just very different. It's not a survey that I sent out, but I'm getting a ton of information on the community in a slightly different way. So it's not that I'm not going to go back and do some of those things, but I feel like we have a lot of information. And I'm also in a very different position. Certainly, I would still go through these exercises because I'm seeing it through a different lens, but I'm not a brand new superintendent either to the district. I've been here for 10 years, and I certainly have a lot of information already about the district. This is the same exercise that I would do had I just started January 2nd, but I started back in July 2009. So the next goal I just wanted to speak to is the cybersecurity program. That program we started right away. We met all of those assignment one, the pre-assessment, the assignment goals. I shared some of the data in the update. And again, my goal with this as well is to share some of these more visually with you. But for this time, I'm giving you the narrative. I figured that was what was best at this time. There's so much else on the agenda tonight. But as you can see that we have a very high passing rate of 92% of all staff that have completed the pre-assessment. In addition to this, we were able to add folks from the community. We had some folks from Town Hall, from the fire department, and from the police department who are also participating in this. And I think we actually have talked with the folks at the government. This is a state program that, as much as it seems like this is something we should move away from right now because there's so much else going on, in some ways, being aware of cybersecurity has never been more important. We talk about, Zoom bombing and phishing scams, and for now that we're all doing things virtually, there's so many other ways to prey on staff and students, and it's important for us to be vigilant with this. So we're going to continue with this. We have some more time for folks to complete assignment 1. We're going to move into assignment 2, and then we're going to be getting our starting tomorrow. I'm going to be testing out, and then it's going to roll out with everyone, these phishing simulations that folks will just react to what's happening in their email. And so I feel like it is a confusing time, and there's a lot going on, but at the same time, it's never been more important, I think, for us to continue with that work. The next one is another one that is definitely continuing, and it's just a little different than I thought. But we talk about transitioning and using social media and new technologies. I have gone from being a little bit nervous to send a Blackboard to I think I'm an expert now. I send them very often. I've communicated in multiple ways, something that I've done. I think most folks are aware, but when I send out, I will send out very often a phone call, an email, but also a text. And the text has a short link right to my blog. And I've heard from several parents who've appreciated the blog because all of my messages, when there's so many messages, they're all in one place. And if you miss one, you can just very easily read yesterday's or the day before. All of these things are double posted on our website in clear and easy places to visit. I've also been using Twitter quite a bit and retweeting and sharing a lot of information there. So I feel like, this situation has certainly given me quite a lot to talk about and to communicate. And I feel like I have done quite a bit there. And from what I've heard from folks, it's been fairly well received, but I'm certainly open to feedback and comment on that. The last one here is about social emotional learning. And, this goal, there were two main pieces to this. One was our SEL committee, which we formed. I helped to lead that group. Cynthia Conant and Catherine O'Connell also played key roles in rolling this out and developing a plan. We have an incredible plan for next year. We still have one session with our group for this year that we have to meet, but we have a great plan for sort of that second phase of the rollout. We have our early adopters on board, but we now need to think about how we get more of our folks involved in this critical learning. And so we're going to use both the Ed-Eval system, which will build upon educators' goals, and also our new teacher induction program. So we sort of have a captive audience of our non-professional status teachers who are looking for, as contractually, we are rolling out our program in years 2 and 3. So we're going to combine and get a lot of our teachers trained in this in the next year or two. And by the end of that program, we will have quite a substantial number of teachers trained in this program. We're very excited about that. The second part of this is that we have strategically looked at our K-12 action team, which I've led as assistant superintendent for many years. And I also see the value in combining, because it's a lot of the same folks and a lot of the same work. We're trying to work smarter, not harder, and have less groups that are doing the same thing. And so we've coordinated a lot of our events and a lot of our action teams with the community impact team and some other groups as well. And we've got some folks coming to our meetings and getting our numbers up and really getting everybody committed to this social emotional work around the table together. And so we've already done that with a couple of our meetings. We have to cancel our April meeting at this time, but we probably will resume and have at least one virtual meeting again this year, and certainly to continue this in the future. So that there was quite a bit of work that was already done in this arena already this year. And I think I glossed over it earlier, but under the security, in addition to cybersecurity, there's also the school safety committee, which again I met with a few times prior to the closure, and certainly I've said this before. I can't say enough of how much we've come together as an entire, not just the police and fire and other folks, but the Board of Health and the town administrator. I mean, I think the amount of time and effort and great teamwork we've put in coordinating our messages and our outreach and our efforts has certainly been more than I even ever anticipated. We had a couple of school safety committee meetings scheduled, and I've probably met with this team now because of the situation probably 15, 20, 30 times, including a call earlier today. So it's been a great experience. I've learned quite a bit, and it's hard to believe that I am here at this midpoint of this first half year, but I wanted to make sure I provided you with this update. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daly. I'm going to start with Janine. And so, Janine, do you have any comments or questions? And can you also share a little bit, since you have more experience than I do on this? What sort of vote do we usually do on this? Is it just to accept it, or do we comment on? And I look at your experience here as well, and your comments here, Janine.
Well, first I would like to say thank you to Dr. Daly. He's doing an extremely good job, and I would just like to say that. And then secondly, as to the procedure is generally the evaluation is handed out to the school committee, and they assess him on what his goals are and how has achieved them. So, to Dr. Daly's point, we are the ones that would check off on target, off target, or not, not started. So that would be what we filled out. And I believe who's ever on the evaluation committee, there should have been a date that we got the package and then assessed it.
Yeah, but you need
and then say that again.
Yeah, so I was looking at that. And I are on the committee, and our return of the feedback on this mid-cycle report is due in the next meeting. So I believe that it's on Chris and I to make sure you have copies of this and explain how we want it returned. But I think I don't remember that we did this last year.
I don't believe we did them.
Yeah. So if I may jump in, it may be a little bit. I may be doing it slightly different. First of all, second of all, because I'm in my first 3 years, we've got the formative cycle, which is a little bit different. Right. The forms might be a little different. So just after Mr. McGowan explained, my goal was to sort of present it to you tonight publicly. You then can look at it and provide me feedback at this time, and this is to help me to be on target. The way I explain it to our teachers, to put me on the right path, to make sure I meet those goals that are to be met in July, and to provide me support and feedback to get there. If you feel that I've not started, that's obviously something I need to start. But if I'm off target, I want to know now so that I can course correct and get to meet the goals in July. So I think that's exactly right. You would now take this information and then provide comments to give to me again in public at the next meeting.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, generally you do it once a year. You don't do it twice a year. So this being the had it been a normal year, this would have been the end of the year summary, not the mid-year. Do you know what I'm saying? So, we would assess you, but it's going to be assessed again later.
Right. So what I would say is that I think we should take a quick pass at this in time for the next meeting. And again, it's really just marking off our thoughts, and then we can comment, during the meeting in terms of more specifics. But and then the real evaluation will be at the end of the year, which we kind of need to discuss anyway. The whole calendar is a little screwy with the town meeting being moved and potentially the budget not being resolved until later in the year. So this, at the moment we don't even have July meeting scheduled yet because we haven't discussed the next year's schedule of meetings. But I think our next meeting from tonight is May 4th. Is that right?
It would be if we may have a budget workshop, but yes, the next regular meeting I believe is May 4th.
Right. Yeah. So I would suggest that, and we can come back to letting everybody comment, but I would suggest that Chris and I get our heads together and figure out how we want to handle it. We'll get you guys the forms, and then we'll explain we'll sort of detail how we want to get them back and be ready to present at that next meeting. Does that make sense for everyone?
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Rich. So, okay, Diana, any thoughts on progress or anything else?
No, I think we have a good path forward.
Rich?
No, thank you.
Chris?
Not at this moment, thank you.
And I'll just say, I think you've done a great job so far, Patrick. I think regardless of what goals we set up to evaluate you, I think you've had some bigger challenges than anybody could have anticipated, and done great with it so far. So thank you very much. So there's no vote needed at this point in time. We will just comment and plan on having some comments from the committee as a whole at the next meeting. So moving on, we have routine matters. We actually do have a couple topics to discuss in here, but I am going to just go in order just so I don't forget anything. We have a couple sets of minutes here. So Janine, since you're our expert on that, I have a motion first, and then a motion in a second, and we'll see if there's any errors on these. To accept the open session March 18th, 23 minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for March 18th open session as written. I did not see any error.
I'll second. Rich?
Okay, any discussion or any other comments or changes anybody noticed? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye. Chris?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well, so unanimous 5-0. Thank you very much. And Janine, if you wouldn't mind, go on to the March 23rd, 2020 open session meeting.
I make a motion to accept the open session meeting of March 23rd as written.
I'll second.
Any discussion, any changes? Okay, roll call vote again. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. So again, unanimous 5-0. Thank you. Moving on, we have a budget update, and Michael's going to speak about the North Reading, the NRC memorandum of agreement, which he and I had some discussions about today as well. So I'll turn this over to you, Michael. Are you still with us, Michael? Did we lose you?
I'm sorry, I'm here. I was muted. I was talking.
Right.
So thank you, Mr. Buckley. So yeah, in the form of a budget update tonight is not the kind of traditional financial update, but it certainly has implications on the FY20 budget. And So there was a memorandum of agreement, and I do have an update, a favorable update to that agreement this evening. But I think I just want to provide a little bit of context and background between some of what's been taking place, really statewide with transportation companies. So there's certainly been a lot of conversation at the state level. The Associate Commissioner of the Department of Education, Jay Sullivan, has weighed in on several conference calls, and we've set up a lot of working groups to really go back to the various transportation providers, ours being NRT Corporation, and trying to work with them to develop really a proposal or an MOA or an agreement that kind of works for all. I think we've all tried to take the approach that these services, this is really a partnership in a way. Transportation. The safe transportation of our students in North Reading certainly plays an important role and we're all facing very challenging times financially. The companies and our vendors that we've relied on to deliver very important services, transportation being one, as well as various others in terms of our special education services, our tuitions, our collaboratives, our private day schools. They're all faced with many of the same challenges, and they're all working on behalf of our students. So I've certainly taken the approach with a lot of my colleagues to try to hear out, various vendors, NRT being one of them, and trying to approach this in a way that will assure, first and foremost, that when we do resume normal operation and school reopens, that we're able to provide the transportation service to our students, in a safe and effective manner. But certainly, that being said, there's a financial conversation that has to be had at, what really is an appropriate amount for districts to be incurring during the school closure period. And there's been a team of colleagues that have been working with NRT Incorporation, and certainly myself being one of them, and many of the area North Shore, Merrimack Valley districts that also contract with NRT have all been part of these conversations. And so I have been privy to a few presentations by John McCarthy, the CEO of NRT, and he's presented his finances and the situation with his company, and we've tried to work out a plan that was kind of work for all. So that there is an agreement that's in front of you that essentially, I'll just say before I get to kind of percentage numbers, and what it essentially attempts to accomplish is that we would be assured by paying a percentage of the contract during the school closure period, a continuity of service. Service would be able to continue when school does reopen with no disruption and no impact. That first and foremost, the drivers that we've come to know, our North Reading students, our North Reading routes, will be ready to return and resume normal operation when needed. So those drivers, which is in a lot of ways an extension of our operation, our employees, this agreement would ensure they would not be laid off or furloughed, and by NRT, and that they would be there ready to return to North Reading when we need them. It also ensures other necessities like the proper maintenance, inspection, and upkeep of all of our equipment and vehicles, cameras, GPS equipment, and obviously the buses and so forth. It would ensure driver training and safety training on a monthly basis would continue by the North Reading team. And if necessary and if needed, it would ensure that if we needed NRT to step forward with delivery of mail, school supplies, technology equipment, whatever we may need in the form of transportation during a school closure period, that would also be available at no cost. So that was kind of the objective and the goal. What through this conversation, I think some of the things that would be at risk should we not reach an agreement and do that in the relatively near future, since the NRT has to kind of react and act as districts that are going to try to work with them, and those that may not, in terms of what they do for their operation, their financial operation, and how they handle their employees. Risk of not reaching an adequate agreement, could potentially lead to our North Reading NRT drivers that drive our North Reading routes each and every day. These are the 10 routes at all of our 5 schools. Could potentially would be laid off, and there would be no guarantee that they would be available when school returns. When school does reopen, whether it be in May or later in the school year, or potentially even next fall, if that were to be the case, there would be no guarantee that we would potentially have the drivers to be able to fulfill the contract, and that certainly would be a concern. We definitely want the drivers to be there that know our routes, that be able to step back in and have it as a minimal of a disruption as possible. We transport the vast majority of students. I think it's about 1,400 students purchase a bus pass or receive a free busing in North Reading, out of the 300 plus students. So it's definitely an important part of the operation. And we want to ensure that when school does resume, that we can deliver that service. That's certainly an important part of that. It certainly, to me, it's a safety issue. We don't want to put a situation where there's more cars on the road, or students, forced to walk and down streets with potentially no sidewalks. So I think it's important that we try to work out an agreement, and that's why I'm here tonight with this drafted MOA. I think I kind of heard enough in the many calls and presentations I had been a part of that I was prepared to kind of move the conversation. I will say, that being said, I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of healthy debate on what that percentage rate should be, and I've been a part of those conversations. And I think when you look at this and how Mr. McCarthy with NRT has presented, that certainly when they bid school bus contracts, there's a lot that goes into those costs. Not only is there regular busing a piece of that contract, but they bid that, and if awarded that contract, there's a recognition that there's athletic runs and extracurricular and field trip runs as well. So what we're really talking about here is an assurance that we're going to be paying for that regular busing piece, or a portion of that, to ensure everything that I just presented would be the case. We would not be incurring any costs should there be no athletic season this spring, or any school related field trips, given a prolonged school closure. So the update that I do have is the percentage that's referenced in the document. I'm happy to report tonight that Mr. McCarthy has kind of heard some concerns about that percentage rate through various business managers, through even Team Collaborative's board of directors, with a team of superintendents. And he has gotten more aggressive on working with his costs and his team, working with his insurance company that insures his vehicles, to reduce his costs during the school closure period. And as a result, he's gotten that percentage number significantly down. So the amount that's reflected in the MOA this evening is not the right amount. I'm happy to report. So it would certainly be the highest we would pay would be at 80% of the contract price. So there's certainly fuel savings that would be part of this. He's been able to ensure there would be a level of insurance savings. And then when school would to be reopened, or operations would to return to normal, those insurance costs would go back up on his end. And we would get the reassurance almost like an insurance policy that our drivers would be ready and available to return. If we need services during school closure, they're there at no cost. Our equipment's going to be maintained and inspections and so forth, and any type of training to meet either state guidelines or professional development to the bus drivers would continue and occur during this time period. So I think what we're really talking about now here is we would pay no more than 80%. I think there's a good chance in the coming days that may go down to somewhere in the mid-70s, the percentage basis. We're going to know more by the end of this week. I'm assured that he's working to reduce that percentage rate, which is all good news to us and every district that's working with NRT to try to make this work. And I think when you look at the whole picture and you look at what we're paying and what we would, under this agreement, continue to pay at 80%, when you look at what we would not pay in terms of athletics and extracurricular, I think it's fair to say what we're really talking about is an agreement here to pay about when you factor in that we would not be paying athletics and field trips and so forth. Savings in the area of about, we'd be paying really around 70 to 72% of our expenses, during the school closure period. And so I think when you factor in the other optional athletics and extracurricular services, which when he did the contract, he's factoring all of that into his pricing and so forth. So to him, the loss of the school closure and the loss of that athletic and extracurricular piece is a substantial part of their profit margin, which I think was driving up the percentage rate when you look at just the regular busing piece. I know it was kind of alarming to all that he might be asking for originally numbers between 92 and 95%. But I think we've gotten to a much better place by some very, very good advocacy on the part of superintendents and business managers, and people are just trying to have a very amicable, reasonable, rational conversation about this. I think we're in a much better place this evening that we know we're not going to pay any more than 80% on the regular end. And when you factor in other savings, we're really looking at about a 70% portion of the contract in the aggregate of all costs. So what I'm really looking for this evening is for you to kind of look at the MOA that was drafted. And, I think I am looking for approval to move forward should I need to do so in the coming days, because we're not going to be together for a period of time. And, he does need answers back in a reasonable time frame to whether or not he is going to either employ our drivers or not. And he needs to react as a business owner as well. So that's kind of my opening comments. I hope I captured everything. Mr. Buck, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions? Does that cover it?
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to just add a couple things because I had some concerns when I read it last evening at 95%, and I also researched a little bit. I know that Haverhill, who also has NRT, rejected this exact proposal, the 95% or 92.5%. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more to Michael about it. I did feel better after my conversation, and so I just want to make sure I reiterate for everybody kind of what Michael was saying and using some numbers. Basically, our base contract is about $70,000 a month. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we're looking at about 3 months, about $210,000 would be the base contract, what we're talking about the discount on. But really, NRT would have made an extra $35,000 or so in athletics and field trips and other sort of activities. And so when you think about it, like they're not losing just, now it's going to be 20% if we're paying 80%. They're not just losing 20% of that $210,000. They're also losing the full athletics and full field trips. And it seems like what they've done is they've allocated their expenses over all of those, so the profit margin is really spread out. So the way I'm calculating it with the 80% would be there'd be about a $42,000 savings on the base contract, but then we'd also not be paying the $35,000 or roughly out of athletics and field trips. So the total savings would be about $39,000 31.4%. But for purposes of refunds, like that $37,000 we don't actually have, which is why I'm a little bit nervous if we go to the next step of refunds. But with that being said, the way I look at it is we're effectively getting about a 30 to 32% reduction of what we normally would be paying, or NRT essentially is taking in about 30 to 32% less than they normally would be taking in, which seems like a fairer amount than what I thought it was before. But I want to open it up to questions from other people. And so, I don't know, Rich, do you want to start? You look like you're off mute.
Sure. First of all, we need to discuss burying the lead. Might have wanted to lead with the adjustment in the rates, but that's okay. So conceptually, I'm in favor of all of this. I for a number of reasons, but in a practical sense, Michael, what you explained, what you talked about in terms of, I think we're all going to find out it's a lot easier to stop this economy than it is going to be to start it back up again, and that goes to, running a bus business as well, I'm sure. So I think the goals of all of this are right, and I think 80% or whatever the number turns out to be makes a lot more sense to me than 95% did. Just looking at it, just thinking about, if you look at in our budget, even our personnel costs, being our salary costs being 83% of our budget, probably something similar or even less than that for his business, because he does have obviously high insurance and financing costs. But so the number makes more sense to me anyway, and I'm much more inclined to go along with that number than I would have been at 95. So I'm okay with that.
Diana, another question?
I actually agree with Rich. I think Scott, hearing your breakdown, it makes a lot more sense to me. I mean, the numbers as we initially reviewed were a little hard to swallow, but I think that interpretation really helps understand the total impact. So I am supportive.
Janine?
Okay. I might have missed something, but I have a couple of different things. With the PPP that's out there, won't their employees be reimbursed first and foremost?
When you say reimbursed, you mean would they be eligible for some type of if they were laid off, would they be?
Won't NRT, or have they, I guess, applied for the PPP, which means that they won't lay off their employees and they will continue to pay them, and that it will be forgiven at the end. Right.
So NRT, they don't necessarily qualify for they don't actually qualify for all the small business breaks that is covered under the PPA. Yeah, they're a very large company, extremely large company.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So then,
I'm sorry. He did explain that in our presentation.
And then I think Scott might have hit on it a little bit, but how much of the contract is gas maintenance versus the driver's salary? And what happens if they don't come back? Are they going to reimburse us for lack of the employees to drive the buses?
So the idea of the agreement is, number one, that we would have kind of confirmation that the drivers would stay employed and come back. If they don't, then he would be a default of this agreement. And I think we would have repercussions to come back and seek some be rectified for that situation. So the whole idea is that it's going to keep the drivers employed, and they would return as that drivers when school reopens.
Okay.
So maintenance would continue. The buses, honestly, the buses not running is almost, they need to be maintained even more so right now, quite honestly. So there would certainly be some level of maintenance continuing, and certainly there's a level of fuel and insurance cost savings that they're going to be achieving through not operating, not being school, and that's kind of the main savings that we're trying to capture here.
Okay. And then a question too, should school not reopen for the remainder of the year, are they going to reimburse us, and I should say, are we going to reimburse families?
If school were not to reopen this year, is that it?
Yes. Yes.
This is sort of the agreement during the school closure period. That this is what we're putting in place to ensure those drivers remain employees for the school closure period. So if it extends to the end of the year, then that extends to the end of the year. And then in September, they'll be ready to resume.
Okay. And then I guess to that end, are we obligated to reimburse families because they didn't use a quarter worth of their payment for?
I don't know if we're obligated. I mean, I think this is a very unprecedented situation that no one could foresee. Typically, when someone signs up for a bus pass, there's clauses that say it's a non-refundable bus pass. And typically, after a portion of the year, we necessarily wouldn't be issuing refunds, but it's set for specific situations. This is just completely unprecedented, and I think it certainly begs the question. I think it's a conversation we need to have as we know more about the school closure period and how long that potentially could extend this year. I certainly have run some scenarios of what that would look like and what that would mean financially if a portion of a refund was given.
Okay, thank you. That was just my.
It sounds like. I'll just say we've talked about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. All the potential reimbursement. Right.
I'm sorry. What was it? Was the question, Rich? I didn't quite catch it all.
Rich, can you repeat yourself? Rich.
Sorry, my computer went to a different place. It feels like we have in general, the conversation about reimbursement on a number of different categories is still to be had for us, right? I mean, we just don't know yet.
Correct.
This
right.
is sort of just separate. This is just us and the bus company, us and the bus pass holders, and all the other things that it's all to be discussed.
Yes, I think it is a separate. They both ultimately would have an impact budget-wise, but I think it is separate. I think right now we're looking to agree to pay a portion to the company, certainly not a full portion, but a percentage basis that's fair and that we can understand based on the savings they're incurring. To also just be, as I've said, be ensured that they'll be able to pick up where things left off with when we do resume, and we all know at some point when we will be resuming school.
Dr. Daly?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, in addition to the concept of a reimbursement or a refund, we've also discussed some kind of voucher or credit. Just something to be discussed. As we said, there's a lot still to discuss, but in some ways that concept may make more sense for us for the future than issuing refunds to folks for this year. Just something to keep in mind.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Chris, do you have any comments, thoughts?
I could go with that. I think that in principle, this is a great idea. I think that that, as Michael said, that these bus drivers and employees, not only are they essential, but I remember back when I was in school, they feel like part of the school staff. So keeping them on hand, keeping them available to have that job is important for us. And at 80%, given the explanations before, I think that this is a good move for us.
And I still do think it's a little bit high. I would hope that with gas savings, I would hope that NRT would potentially be, cutting into their profit. My worry is I want to make sure that NRT survives as well, because we need the company to survive in order to have buses next year. We need the bus drivers to be available. We need the buses to not be, taken back from any leasing companies, things like that. But I just want to make sure that we're, I would hope that NRT is not just trying to, other districts are cutting into it, that, that we're getting a good deal or something fair. Ultimately, for refunds, the way I look at it is if it's 80% and we're saving essentially $40,000 the rest of the year. I mean, typically about half of that comes from school, half comes from bus permits. So I would see at most there'd be about $20,000 to be, split up. But again, I think that's a different discussion right now. We have to get a deal. I think that I don't love this. I mean, I hated 95%. I don't love 80% still. I hope it can be less than that. But I also know from my experience, usually with Michael, that's Daily said this before. Like if Michael's usually, adamant about it, Michael's usually right on his thoughts on things, and he's the one that's in the room. And so, unless I have real reason to overturn his opinion on something, I tend to defer to Michael, just like I would defer to Dr. Daly on most things. And so, I'm being supportive of it as well. I think we need a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement, understanding that the percentage may be changing still. I don't know if somebody wants to make that motion for us.
I mean, I'd like to move that with the understanding that it's not going to be 95%. If that's okay.
Yeah, I would say assuming 80%, possibly less from along those lines.
Yeah, 80% or less, maybe. Okay. That being the case, I move that the committee vote to accept the memorandum of understanding between the North Reading Public Schools and NRT Inc. With the proviso that the percentage stated at 95% will not be the case. It will be 80% or perhaps less. That's great.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? For roll call, Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm in favor as well. Aye. So it passes 5-0. Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
There's no staffing at this time, correct, Dr. Daly?
That is correct.
And so for bids and donations, I know Michael was going to talk about the LED project, and I might try to move it along slightly, but so I'm going to jump in if it's okay with you, Michael, quickly. But we did have a subcommittee, a committee forum that looked at the two different LED presentations, one from ELC and one from a company called Energyware. Really appreciate everybody on that committee that was there and gave their time. From that, we got two really good companies that did a great job of presenting. The one wrench that was thrown in at the end of that was we were prepared to offer the contract to ELC. I think it was done. And then the other company did come back with a revised proposal, which, was better. And fortunately, ELC also came back with a revised proposal. So I think we, got to the same point we were at, which was we thought that ELC was a better presentation or a better proposal overall. But that's sort of like the update on the committee. But I turn it over to Michael to talk about the next steps.
Yeah, I think Mr. Buck, I think you kind of said it perfectly. That was sort of the process. Certainly appreciate the selection committee's role in hearing the presenters. Diana was a part of that. Don Kelleher, Liz Rourke, Wayne Hardacre. Certainly two very qualified firms. I maintain that we almost couldn't go wrong. I think we would have gotten, good service and a good project from both based on references and so forth. We certainly like ELC's approach a little bit better and getting a little bit better original numbers from them, as well as better warranty and insurance coverage, which was attractive. EnergyWare got a little bit more aggressive when they found out that they were potentially going to be the awarding firm. And to be fair, we gave both firms a chance to kind of sharpen the pencil and come back with a revised best offer. And ELC essentially, mirrored the revised offer for EnergyWare. So, as Mr. Buckley already alluded to, I think we're looking at two very good proposals. That ELC is the preferred, based on the committee's rankings, and I think it's the best deal. Essentially, if you look at page 2 of the memo, what the revision essentially was is the cost is less, the overall cost, so they were able to get the cost down from their suppliers, maybe take a little bit less profit margin in this environment that we're dealing with. Everyone wants work, and they were able to get a better rate with their lenders. All that led to a monthly payment, which is reflected on the page 2 of the memo, of about a little over $9,100, getting that down to about $7,500. So the monthly payment almost equals the very conservative energy savings. So I don't think we can almost go wrong financially. It's even more of an attractive proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the proposals or on this project? Okay, the bottom line is it's with the second round of proposals, it really gets us down to, almost exactly balanced. And then I would say ELC was fairly conservative in some of their estimates. So it really gets us down to almost the exact same cost, savings and monthly payments. And so over the course of 5 years, it almost pays for itself. Any comments? Diana, since you're on the committee, do you have any comments first?
No, I think this is, I'm glad to see the additional negotiations. I think we're in a good spot, and I think we're going with the right company, or recommending the right company.
Janine?
Sorry, the star 6 takes a long time. Anyway, no, it looks really good, and thank you guys for all the time and effort that you put into it.
Chris?
No, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm glad we're being conservative on our estimates and to come out in 5 April to reflect on how good of an idea this is.
One quick comment before I call on Rich. The other thing to point out that this does require approval of town meeting. It's in the meeting. It's in the motion that we need to review, but it does require that. And the timeline would be, again, I think it's up in the air depending on what's going on with COVID, but theoretically, the original proposal was it could be done this summer.
Correct.
Rich, any comments or questions?
No.
Okay, so perhaps we could have a motion. There's a recommended motion in the packet if anybody has that open and would like to read it.
All right. I move to authorize the administration to award the contract for installing LED lighting fixtures at all 5 North Reading schools to Efficient Lighting Consultants, as recommended by the Proposal Selection Committee, contingent upon the approval of a 5-year lease agreement at the annual town meeting as of June to be determined for sure 2020.
Correct. Can I have a second?
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? The roll call. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. So motion passes 5-0, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael did all the work, really. And it was great.
Everybody, Michael.
Yes.
No. Thank you.
And it was good to see. It was good to see, the community coming together, and Don Keller in particular, I think, is just a very, very motivated, smart man. So really appreciate working with people on that committee. Okay, for subcommittee updates, the first one is finance planning team.
I'm sorry.
We need to do the warrant article.
Yeah, we just need a last motion on the warrant article.
Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the agenda. I was looking through that. Okay, so can I, Chris, you want to do this one?
Sure. I move that the committee vote to approve the above town meeting warrant article as recommended by the administration to grant approval of a 5-year lease agreement for the installation of LED lighting fixtures at all 5 North Reading schools, contingent upon approval and minor modifications by town council.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Okay, so roll call. Rich.
Aye.
Janine.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Diana.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes by 30 unanimous. Thank you, Rich, for catching that. Okay, looking at the agenda, moving on. Subcommittee, if we're okay. The Finance Planning Team met on April 9th, 2020. I think we've talked a lot about that overall. I think the key thing is we modified the revenue expectations to without any increase from FY21 over FY20. That eventually cut out some amount of money. We'll still have to determine what that amount is, but we think it's for the schools probably about $150,000, but with the cuts maybe it's less. And I think the biggest concern is, we're hearing from the state budget that there might be a 3 to 8% drop, but that does not necessarily mean that it would be 3 to 8% for us. It really depends upon how that is passed on. Just because there's a budget cut does not mean that it's across the board, from my understanding. And so I think we just have to wait for further guidance on that. But, usually at this time of the year, we're hoping to get better numbers meeting after meeting. And I just think going into these meetings, I just hope that it's not worse. But that's the update from me. I don't know, Ginny, do you have any other thoughts?
Am I still muted?
You are not muted.
Oh, thank God. No, actually, that was a very good representation of what happened.
Thank you very much. And the only other thing I would say is the town meeting for the turkey farm has been pushed back. Town election's been pushed back, so you were stuck with me on my first term for another month and a half, but then I'd eventually be voted out. But yeah, that's, I think, all the updates from there. CIPC, Matt, I don't know, we usually don't give any big updates on this, but is there any updates that are worth sharing here? Anybody? Diana? Michael?
I think Dr. Daly did have an update on this.
So, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I just wanted to share the suggestion that came from Michael Gilberto, town administrator, today, that we consider possibly any of the items that we have recommended for CIPC, could they be moved to October as opposed to trying to fund them in the summer? And so, I spoke with Michael about this today. Out of all the items that we recommended, we believe that the pickup truck is one that we really want to make sure we have before the winter. So October is a little bit close, but even with that, we feel that the other items, the computer devices, the lift, those other pieces, they want to try and have the June town meeting vote to be not as complicated. And so they've asked that if we can move things to request October to do so. So I think that, and Michael, if you want to jump in, I feel like we could do this, and I very much understand and respect the position the town is in with respect to that.
Yeah, no, well said. I would agree, Dr. Daly. I think, although we would love to move forward with some of these items, there was definitely a few of these that were ranked kind of high at the last meeting. Given the situation that we're in with the funding and the budget and the uncertainty, I certainly think we could make some of this work if we had delayed it till October.
Okay, and I don't think we need a motion on that, do we?
No.
Been submitted. Thank you very much for that, everyone. And then moving on. Upcoming subcommittee is just finance planning team, although it sounds like maybe there will be a meeting of the evaluation subcommittee as well coming up. The finance planning team is April 23rd at 8 a.m. and it'll be a virtual meeting. For the administrative report, Dr. Daly, do you want to talk about the end of year report?
Yes, just one other item I'll say very quickly. Just I mentioned earlier, but the middle school is canceling their trip to Washington D.C. and I didn't know whether anyone had any comments or questions about that, but if it's okay with you folks, they're going to send those letters home to parents tomorrow. Does that sound good to everyone? Yes, I don't think bad for the kids, but it's going to happen, obviously.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other choice here. The only question would be, is there an option for within 2 classes next year?
Ooh, interesting question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think those questions I can definitely bring back to Dr. O'Connell and Mr. Maloney to consider. I'm sure they're going to do everything to make this right for the kids in some way. So it's something certainly to consider. These are unusual times for sure. So I will definitely bring that question forward.
And I would love to see them get the opportunity, even if it's a year later than it typically is.
Appreciate that. I think that's a great idea. For the end of year report, I've included it here. I think Michael is probably best to speak about it. It's to share some news about our end of year report. So I'm going to scroll down if you want to speak to it, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Daly. So this is typical around this time of year that I include the end of the year, the audit of the end of the year financial report. It's required by law that the end of the year report gets audited prior to March 31st of every year, and that audit report needs to get sent to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So the town auditor completed the work of the audit on the report. As a reminder, it's the end of the year financial report. Essentially, this is for fiscal year 2019. Has to be submitted by September 30th of every year, and it captures all the financial activity in terms of general fund, revolving, grant activity, for the district, both revenues coming in and expenses going out, and they have to be recorded by a certain methodology that the state requires. So I'm happy to report that it was audited and there was no findings. Everything was shown to be materially correct and accurate, as the auditor calls it, which essentially means that everything was correct and there was zero findings.
Thank you very much. And I think the summary is you've done everything well. So I think you should be commended in your team. Any comments or questions from the committee? Perfect. Okay. And in terms of Dr. Dale, I know somebody reached out to me. I think with regard to the assistant superintendent, I think there's, I know the committee's been working hard. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've gone through the process. We had interviews last week. We have 3 excellent internal candidates: Dr. Daniel Downs, our Director of Digital Learning; Dr. Catherine O'Connell, our Principal of North Reading Middle School; Mr. Tom Colleen, our Principal of the Batchelor School. And our committee was made up of teachers, some administrative assistants that work directly with this person, central office team members. We had another principal on there, as well as some of our curriculum leaders. And it was really a fantastic process. We learned a lot from each of the 3 candidates. All of them have such great qualities, and all of them have such great potential as leaders. And, I've said this to some of you in the past, but I say it publicly. I mean, I wish I can keep all of this administrative team forever, but I can't hold anyone back from moving on, because they all are going to go on to great things. So I think we need to value what they bring and make sure that we get, we entice them to stay here as long as possible, because they're fantastic. The next round after those interviews, I've now had a second round with my other members of the central office team. This position obviously is the 4th, but Michael and Cynthia, and we've discussed this, and we're reaching a point where we're ready to name a person for that role. Just given the conversation that you folks had earlier in the budget process, I wanted to make sure we have that discussion first, and also just see if there's any other developments in the next week or so with sort of these drastic cuts before we continue the conversation. Because again, one of my main goals is I do not want to be too disruptive. I don't want to name someone and then start a trickle effect with other positions. That said, I also don't want to wait too long, which is why we stayed with this process, because we would need to name another director or another principal to take that person's place. So it's been a great process. We're very proud of the candidates that we have here, and we're excited to move forward with that position soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any correspondence, Dr. Daly?
There is none at this time.
Okay, so I think the future business, April 29th, we'll have a virtual meeting at the budget workshop. Hopefully we have some more revenue numbers by then. I think we can do it fairly quickly, just sort of looking at where we're at today and what further cuts might be needed. For 2020, we have another school committee meeting. We'll have the budget vote. Well, it could be changed, but right now that's what it's scheduled, virtual TBD. Rich McGowan has a question or a comment. Rich?
Yeah, I just wanted you mentioned the evaluation subcommittee. Our plan is to have an informal conversation about logistics. I don't think we're going to have a official subcommittee meeting, just so you know, just so the public knows.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
And a second.
A second.
Okay, roll call. Rich.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Janine. Janine, you have to unmute yourself.
That's a pain in the butt. Hi.
Diana.
Hi.
And I as well. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the time. I know it's been a long one, but thank you guys all. Pass the 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you guys.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye all.